daughters have been in the Irish
If you walk
for
in
years.
Montreal,
So they have a large
end up,
Catholic family, and everybody, I think they're gonna be dancing.
Welcome, everyone, to our March 17th, 2025 strategic planning meeting on this beautiful St. Patty's Day. Everyone's looking grand and green.
Everybody-
And we are pleased to let the record reflect that we have Commissioner CUNY joining us virtually on Zoom. Looks like she's in her mobile office with us today. And then we have Commissioners Jordan, Waldrop, French, and Kearns in our conference room. We're gonna lead off today with a presentation from Mike Sparber, Detention Services Update. So take it away, and you got a whole crew with you.
I brought a crew. I'm sure everybody's familiar with them, but I have Don Hooper, the chief on my right, and Ken Moore, county project manager on my left. It's been a while since we've been here to update you on the population and take a look at our dashboard. So that's what we're going to do today. Next slide, Rod. So we're going to talk about the current population the way that it is today, and we'll do that via the, like I said, the dashboard. Then we're going to revisit the capacity from both the historical and the present perspective that we're looking at today. And talk and review and add some potential capacity that we had asked to work with an A&E firm or to give an opportunity for us to discuss that just a bit. Then I'm going to remind the board about the significant capital improvements and challenges that we face with the Geiger facility on a continued basis. And then I'm going to close it off with a couple of recommendations that I feel are appropriate for moving forward. Next slide, please, Rob. You bring up the dashboard. Helps me to read my near contact lenses. So error. All right, go ahead and open it up, Ron. I'm gonna slide down here if you guys don't mind. Look at my glasses. So you can see the population. It's a Monday, and typically our peaks are showing up on Mondays and after the holidays, you know, particularly long weeks. Don has some challenges in finding some bed space for them. Today are down 833, 636 of those are downtown. That's a good number to bear in mind as we kind of proceed through the rest of the presentation. Go up just a little bit, Ron. We go to full screen. Good. Then out of Geiger, 197. It's been averaging about 197 down to like 215 or so. It's not much above that out of Geiger, and that's due to the type of population that we were able to send out to Geiger and the restrictions and so forth that we have out there in that facility. You look at the average length of time that they're in custody, 107 days, almost 109 days. From the time they're arrested to the time that they're adjudicated and make their way through court. That's on the average. There's some with length of stay is much longer than that. Our average length of stay is 20 days, which is significantly high for us. We typically see 17 and a half to 18 days length of stay. We're at 20 days length of stay. And that seems to suggest that the charges that we have are more serious charges than felons, and it's taking a little bit more time for disposition. Had 6 incidents so far of red light status, totaling a total of 6 hours for the law enforcement officers able to book their prisoners into the jail. Can you go to the next one? Page 3, please. Still, felony B leads the way for the type of crime that we're housing at the jail. You can see that by far on the left-hand bottom corner, Superior Court has most of the folks that are in jail in the population down on the bottom. Predominantly, the city of Spokane is still leading the way by being the lead arresting agency. And then you can see on the far right at the bottom, the county's responsibility for the prisoners that we have. The county's got the larger share of those as well. Next one, please. And just, real quickly, this is a kind of a glimpse of our, the gender. By far, it's the males. You look at our age population, the demographic has kind of changed. You'll see that predominantly it's above 45 and older, along with 35 to 44. So it's not as young a group that's coming into the jail as we have seen in the past, but, and it tends to be the older folks that are, seems like they're really more thrived. And then you could see our population by race and ethnicity. Next. Those are the type of charges real quickly. You'll see type A's, we're talking about murders. And we have 35 of those in jail right now for murder. You look at the assaults along with that 28% rape. You get down into the V's and it's like burglary, serious assaults. Theft, contraband, illegal firearms, bomb threats, and so forth. And then, type C, you kind of have to go down a little bit on the edge, Ron, to see the type Cs. And then there's the type Cs, violation of orders is predominantly the one that we see a lot of, and then theft and counterfeit, so forth. Right-hand side, the gross misdemeanors, we'll see some more about that in the presentation as well. You can see this for assault, driving under the influence, the mandatory books, and the fourth-degree assault, and then also controlled substance, and then again, violation of protection order seems to be a high level for those in the gross misdemeanors. Next one, please. And then you can see our populations, other ebb and flow, average daily population in the top left. You can see that it trends up and down. We're currently on a peak for the downtown facility, which is at the top of the scale. And then Geiger's also rising along with that population, which becomes important, as we get further on. You'll see on the right-hand side that there is a cluster of charges all together in the middle. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we get to one of the grids too, but you can see how close they are together. By far, felonies are the highest, but C's and B's are kind of all clustered together, and then you can see that the whole are down below. Next, please. This is the average booking rate. You can see that it's on a trend right now where it's going down at the peak end of it. And this is for admissions and arrests. This isn't for people that are in jail. This is for people coming to jail. And I think that's large in part to the right-hand column, those two boxes. And 20 and 24, 15% we were letting out. Once they were booked into jail, they were released immediately without spending the night in jail, go to catch and release. The benefit for that is that the law enforcement officers are able to book them into the booking area, get current fingerprints on them, current mug shots, along with update their residency and some of those things. So there's a benefit for them to book them in and out. We're probably also seeing that some of them aren't making their way to jail because they're being released out on the site and released out on the street. But you hear a fair amount of talk about, trying to divert the population out of jail, and there's some diversions. We're actually diverting about 17% of it right now, but we're doing it in kind of a controlled fashion where we're updating the computer system along with all that information as we're doing it. Yes, it could cause bottlenecks at times, but it's necessary, I think, for us to have accurate information, our law enforcement to have that as well. Next one, please. So this one's kind of a busy slide, but I'll tell you, the red line in the middle is the downtown jail capacity. And that's with the 10% classification factor, which I'll discuss here in a minute in a chart. You can see that I was talking about that cluster of charges. If you look to the right-hand side, Ron, can you go down a little bit where you can see that? There you go. You can see that cluster right here, we're in the 24 to 25 year. They're all kind of grouped together. That population has to have a combination of being able to fit in the downtown jail and eligible to be out at the Geiger facility. And that's why we tend to run right next to the yellow all the time. It's because of those charges that you see right there. The bottom line is the felony line only. You see that it will eventually cross that line where the vast majority will be felons, and that's somewhere in the 27, and I could show you in a later graph about that part of it. Okay, Ron, you could go ahead and close that out.
Can I ask a question on this one?
Yeah.
Does this chart show pre-COVID or is it kind of starting from COVID? Can you go back in time or is
We
it?
could go back in time. We've only, we could go back as far as you want to, but we're just showing a period of time. Yeah. But to answer your question, yes, we can go back and.
I was just curious if it shows that, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next slide, Ron, please.
Chris, help me understand the nature of the question. What is it that you're hoping to see with regard to COVID?
I was just trying to see if you go back in time further, what does the trend look like relative to where we are now? With COVID being obviously an aberration, not
Right,
normal time.
right. With, are you suspecting that it was higher, lower?
Well, I would assume COVID was low, and so I'm just trying to compare previous highs to now.
Okay,
Yeah, and if you look at your next slide on the presentation, it shows you going back to COVID, to your point. And you can see the steady increase as the two trend lines go up. Now, the top line is felony and district court charges only because I wanted to see, you know, from a county's perspective, what charges we we're looking at as far as capacity and, you know, some of those responsibilities that we have as a county. And you can see that in that line, it's a sliver line that's shaded there. That is that cluster of charges that I'm talking about fit into that box. So it's always pushing against the jail capacity plus the higher end that forces us to make decisions about sending folks out to the Geiger facility. Next slide, please. So when you talk about capacity, really you have the population characteristics, you're talking gender, how they classify out, special housing, whether they're in gang or some of the other nuances that go along with it. And charges plays a fair amount of it too, covering the criminal history and their background, determine whether or not they're a safety or a risk to go out to the Geiger facility. They need to be housed in downtown. Then on the facility side, you can see that some of the things are the cell design. There are different cell designs inside the jail. What type of supervision, whether it's close supervision, indirect or direct supervision, and which way they fit into those models, along with the cell type. We have dormitories, and we also have some that we can't put in dormitories. They need to be in a single cell or a double cell, and then finally the capacity, overall capacity of the jail as it goes. Next slide, please. So here's where I get to tell you guys how long I've been with the county. When they first moved into the jail, they moved all the population in the jail and they completely emptied the public safety building, the second floor and the third floor of the public safety building where the old cells were at. They made a determination early on that they wanted to keep a portion of those beds over there. So they added 92 beds, which is the top of the annex. And I've given tours, you guys have seen those. It's got a combination of cells now plus the old bar cells that I think you guys also got an opportunity to look at. And then they converted the second floor into locker room space for the sheriff and for the city of Spokane, along with roll call rooms and some office space. So that's kind of the history on that. Don has also reduced the Marshall prisoners from a count of, what was it originally?
130 about a year and a half ago, and now we told 65 max.
He also reduced the DOC beds. They went down from unlimited to
14.
14, that's correct. We also, working with the shuttle system, we used to do a fair amount of shuttling inmates back and forth from this side of the mountains to the other side of the mountains. One of the things that we were doing, we were holding prisoners over the weekends until the next shuttle came for charges we weren't even booking on. And so we limited it to felonies only, or gross misdemeanors that have to go to the other side. Otherwise, misdemeanors and those other charges, we're not going to hold on to them for the weekend for them. And then there's always that continued monitoring of both the facilities. We're aware of the capacity, aware of the amount of population that can go to either one of them. Don does a fair, which started off with moving, not the majority, but a fair amount of staff out of the Geiger facility downtown to help augment and offset some of the vacant positions along with the overtime that they have. And then that coincides with the type of population that we're able to house at Geiger, which require a smaller staff amount to the ones that we need to be doing downtown. So we're always playing that game, and it's internal as well. Sometimes the females go up and beyond the floor that they have, so that causes us to shift the male population to a different floor in order for us to accommodate the female population. It's kind of moving the boxes around on the inside. Next slide, please. So if you look on the left-hand side, the blue box, that's the jail as it was built originally. You go all the way down to where it says 6E. You've heard that the jail count is 472 and 474. There were some other cells that they counted, which were for rubber rooms, old rubber room cells and those type of things that we originally didn't use. But you hear 472 or 474, that was the original design of the jail. All floors were meant to have 46 inmates on them. Key West had 58 on it. Then you see the addition at the bottom we just talked about historically about adding the annex. Those were the 92 beds that we added. And then that was our total at 564. Then along the way, we doubled up some space on 2 West for 44 cells. That's in the right hand in a green box. We also doubled up 3 West, doubled up 5 West, and doubled up 5 East. That increased the capacity to the right hand side on the green down to 790 for our internal capacity. And then from that, you need to deduct the 10% for allowing them to move flexibly around the building. And that gets us down to about where we're talking about at the 717 mark or a little below. Next slide, please. You'll recall, board, that I came in and Don and I came in, we asked that we could have a A&E firm take a look at the jail and do some research to see what we could do, potentially to add capacity through doubling the floors along with adding additional bunks. And there was an evaluation of the public safety building for some of the old cell space. They are doing that, but they're not quite completed with it. We're working through some of the details. We are discovering that there might have to be some other additions with the increase in capacity versus ingress and egress, and some of the things that we're gonna have to look at as we go along here. So that is currently in the works, and we hope to be back to you all the next couple of weeks with an update on where we stand on those type of things. Next slide, please.
Just a clarification on that.
Mhm.
Were those capital improvements kind of part of the assumed budget that we put into that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we had boarded committed $2 million, up to $2 million for potential capital needs at the downtown facility. And Mike, you might want to mention, those were intended to look at both the jail as well as the annex, right?
Right.
And I think what we've determined, at least early on, is the annex is likely not an opportunity to do an expansion there because of a variety of reasons, right?
Right, so the second floor of the annex was another area. It was essentially the old jail on the second floor, a portion of it that it wasn't being utilized for office space. And it's storage right now, so we had them reevaluate that. It is, in theory, it's a very good idea. It's one that we want to do, is to move the transport unit down there because it could disperse out to the courts from that area. And then we could use the remaining housing up in the annex to add some additional beds. The challenge is that we'd have to take up a fair amount of that floor. It would impact probation, the probation side of it. And then in order to get enough capacity for the holding cells, we would have to remove the city's male and female locker rooms from the back of it in order to push back towards the wall. So that's what it's looking at, Palmy. I will have all the details on it when I come back, but it sounds like it's going to be particularly challenging, but something that could be done if we had to.
And the cells were there, they've repurposed, they put network rooms, they've built HVAC through them. It would be a very, very expensive proposition to reuse those cells.
So on that shiny note, let's take a look at Geiger. It's an aging facility. It was built in 1952 as an Army barracks. All the retrofits were out there. All we could do. It mounts to razor wire around the outsides of it, adding some control rooms, and then having officers monitor the floor. It does require significant capital improvements in the future if we want to have a useful life. Some of those are estimated below, which is the environmental retrofit, which we know is 40 to 45 million. The boilers, most particularly is that last one, which is the kitchen. If you look at the pictures on the right-hand side, that's underneath the kitchen. The floor has had standing water on it for over the years for so long that it is deteriorating. So it'll take a significant investment to do that as well. And then I can remind the board that we're operating 2 facilities, so there's duplication of services, 2 nurses out there, duplication of staff. So that falls in line with that. And then ultimately, the last bullet point, anything that we do for the Geiger facility in the way of, retrofitting or repairs to it will be lost when we move out of it. The whole building has to be demolished and taken down for, 4.75 on that one.
So before you move away from that, I ended up having a couple meetings last week, one presentation with SBA and then a couple other meetings in addition to that, but there is a question that's being asked of me, and I think that's also being asked with Sheriff Knowles, is, what are the constraints for being able to incarcerate people that are arrested downtown? And I think Sheriff and I both said capacity, and said, well, how are you at Geiger? And we said under capacity because the building is functionally obsolescent. I said, well, if we could find some space for you to incarcerate folks so that they're not, catch and release, would you be willing to do that? I said, well, I don't know. That's more of a board decision than it is me. But I said, I personally would support it, but just to be able to get people off the street, because what's frustrating for the downtown folks is, they catch them and ticket them and back on the street, nothing happens. So there's no disincentive to commit further crimes. So the question continues to come up with regard to Geiger. Well, what would it take to, open up more of Geiger? And I said, a lot of money. Yeah. I said, what's a lot of money? And I said, well, the last number I heard was somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 million. And your number is grossly north of 15 million. So of the number that you have here, environmental retrofit, I mean, how much of that is really, if we were only looking to try and get 5 years out of the Geiger, we're not looking to get 30, we're looking to get 5. And try and carry us until we've got a new facility. What would that cost look like? I mean, the new boilers, yeah, probably. Fire code capital improvements, yeah, maybe. Building repairs and then a kitchen. So you might be 3 million to just get 5 years as opposed to, 50 million to get 30 years. Is that a reasonable number?
So.
And before I put you on the line,
Okay.
the other part of that conversation is if the private sector was to help offset some of that cost, what would that number be? And I go, great questions. I have no answers, but I'm willing to ask the question. So this is something I was going to tee up to ask you later on. Then you're doing this presentation, so I'll put you on the spot. Is a $3 million number a reasonable number to just try and get 5 years out of that building?
So honestly, comfortably, I'd want somebody to evaluate it so that I have if someone evaluate it to see what it would cost. So what we're doing though is we're adding money to a facility that's going to have a limited amount of population that can go out there. It's going to take some fire things code improvements we know right now already that is something that's being discussed. And then the kitchen for sure you would have to redo if you're going to cook out there. So I know the city is leaning in on a model that's out of Seattle where the King County was a felony-only facility for years. And the law enforcement had worked with them to offer them 10 beds in the jail for the most prolific criminals they have. So if they arrest them, they would put them into those 10 beds. And I think the city is trying to lean into that model as well. However, we're releasing 17% of them at the door already. And so I think that it would have to be an evaluation of what charges they're talking about and space. I'd hate to dedicate, right away to this program, not knowing that we'll have the capacity for it. So going back to your question, I think that in order to do this justice, we'd have to have someone evaluate it. I may have to approach the board if that's the direction that we want to go in, and then have someone evaluate it along with Gillen and Bruce to try and give me a better idea of what a 5-year looks like over that. It is expensive to monitor because, like I said, there's duplicative services, and so that we could make some reductions on the heels of what this next budget cycle is going to look like. So I'll just leave it at that, and then I'll work with you, Commissioner. If that's the board's direction, I'll work with you to do what I'm saying.
I'm sorry. One of the other big concerns I have is the severity of the medical issues we're dealing with, as well as the withdrawals. So right now, everybody's downtown for the first 4 days before they're out to Geiger. So anything that entails like direct booking out there, I'm concerned about the medical issues we're dealing with already, as the board's aware of. And majority of people coming from the downtown, that they're looking to arrest would probably be dealing with withdrawal issues. And so downtown, majority of the medical staff, so we're staffed more adequately. The facilities, direct supervision, you can see better lines of sights and things like that. Remote supervision out there, it would cause a lot of other concerns, I think, too. So.
Well, I do know, based upon a meeting I had Friday with the mayor, that the city is looking at some other options for incarceration other than Geiger, if Geiger is not an option. But one way or the other, we're going to end up with a remote situation, and we're going to end up with, additional cost. And so the challenge is, what's that cost? Who's going to pay for it? And what kind of help can we get from the private sector? Because from their standpoint, the message that was given to me on Monday was, we're already paying money for security. And it's because you're not locking these people up. If you lock them up, the money we paid could be to the county to pay for incarceration, as opposed to security to basically just Band-Aid the problem. So it was a conversation. It wasn't a campaign, but it was a willingness to look at a different model than what we did. I did say that we did explore the sprung idea, and the sprung idea was not only costly, but the other challenge is we couldn't build it on Geiger because we are limited. We can't put new structures on the Geiger leased property. So where would that go? So understand that there are challenges, but just wanted to share with you that there's a growing conversation about what is it that we can do to increase capacity until a new jail is built. So share that with you, and then I'm going to kick my soapbox to
We turn over every stone, don't we? We're
Looking for every bit.
in the option.
I think we've known for quite a long time that the look and release nature of where we're at with jail capacity is causing challenges. It has been for years and years and years because people aren't spending night in jail. I think there's oftentimes a perception that because of the location of the downtown jail, it's causing the folks who are committing the crime to be right back downtown. And I think that's a bit of a misnomer. It's certainly the book and release. If they're not spending a night in jail, that person is 3 hours back downtown. Even if they're out at Geiger, when they get released, they get a bus ticket. Where's the bus go? Downtown. So there's clearly a challenge with us not being able to have enough capacity to handle those. But it really just depends on what's the problem we're trying to solve on. Is that the problem we're trying to solve on? Geiger's not a great solution. If we open up more wings, it would predicate us having more staffing. And we already know where we're at staffing wise. we are struggling just to keep the people that we have out at Geiger and down the jail. And Geiger right now is, even if we had 2x the staffing or 50% more staffing, no additional people would be coming down from the jail out to Geiger because of the characteristics of their
Charges.
and how they get categorized. So it's a lot of implications. Even if we have $5 million, we don't have staffing to go open up more wings out there.
Yeah, we'd be better served to have a cell that would accommodate any type of person, you know, if that makes sense. Because we're really limiting ourselves if we just focus on the Geiger facility.
So getting back to the annex and the conversation about whether or not it's appropriate to do renovations there. Because I hear the staffing issues, even if you open up the wing, do we have the staff to even run it? And are there enough of that particular population that would be eligible to be out there, right?
At least our thought process on the downtown facility was that creating space in the
Right.
existing annex that we could put pretty much any offender.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I guess I hear that there's other uses, right? Probation and other uses. Do we think that that's, you know, with the purchase of the new building here on the campus? I mean, it seems like that would make the most sense to have cells that anybody could be eligible to use. And so I'm just wondering, I hear what you're saying, Scott, but wondering if renovating that and moving folks into some other new space that we've just recently, I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah.
It might be the most cost effective.
I think that's why.
I mean, when you look at the numbers, I don't know. I don't know what these
That's-
numbers are really looking like.
yeah.
but
That's part of what Michael
It's
be.
really more like a staffing.
Yeah.
It's having all the staff in one location, being able to manage the population.
And that's
Yeah.
what I'm shooting
Having
for.
two facilities is costly for us, and it's operationally challenging as well, because you can't do the coverages when you have people who are, you're short staffed down here, you have people who are off. It's overtime for folks, which is then costly for us. If you have one facility, you can blend the folks together, then you and Dawn can manage the staffing a lot differently. One of the things that Mike and Don are doing is they're looking at the downtown jail also for increasing capacity. That's why he'll be coming back and talking about some of the changes that we'll have to do to the jail, improvements to be able to increase the capacity downtown. So it kind of gets back to that single facility thing that it solves a lot of things on the staffing side. It eliminates the duplicate transport, duplicate kitchen, duplicate linen services, duplicate medical, all that sort of stuff that we have to manage in two places today. So I agree with you, Commissioner. That's having it in a.
Anyway, I was just gonna suggest we don't completely give up on that option and really run the numbers on it, you know, compared to what we're spending at Geiger as well. But I also hope that all of our investments, you know, to the concerns, the legitimate concerns of the fentanyl and opioid epidemic on the impacts to downtown and business owners. I hope that all the millions of dollars that we've already put of the opioid settlement money, and that what the city's matching when we open up those detox beds and hopefully some more treatment up at the opioid treatment program. And those will be, we're not seeing them yet, but those will be new places to bring people hopefully to get to treatment and support rather than jail. So anyway, all those things are hopefully gonna come together, but we gotta figure out the jail capacity issues too.
So the other, and this was a conversation that I had with the sheriff, was, you know, we could create more capacity if we could get him and DEM out of the DEM building and convert the DEM building to, you know, short-term stays or whatever. And so I don't know where that conversation is at in terms of, you know, the one time we were talking about relocating them out by the small arms range. But I don't know where that conversation has migrated to. But ultimately, the DM building might be an option for us.
We've looked at the DEM before, and Bruce had indicated that that it would take a significant amount of money don't know what that dollar was, but that's to upgrade that enough to have inmate population inside of it. So I mean, I'm happy to have him relook at those things done, you know, if it becomes something that we want to do. But again, we would want to replicate cells that we can put any inmate. And going back to what both Scott and Mr. Waldorf were talking about, you know, our goal was to fit in one building. That's what we're looking to do because we saw the enormous amount that it would cost to fix Geiger. We were looking at the capacity. That's still the way that we're looking at it. And so we hope to come back with something that's a little more concrete with numbers again. So you understand.
So as long as we're talking about a new jail, that is what we're talking about, right?
But
Okay.
I never brought that up.
So, an idea that was floated to me last week, was if the city is not successful at, getting the exemption for the waste energy plant, then the waste energy plant would become, an abandoned asset. And so would there be any possibility of maybe putting a new jail on that property as opposed to Geiger? Because that property is outside of the aeronautical zone. So it's not limited in terms like Geiger is in terms of a jail facility, but it would be on property that, you know, it's already owned by the city and, you know, is that an option? And I don't know. You know, the question was asked and I said, well, I'll investigate and find out. But, you know, that's clearly a lot less of a commute than going all the way out to Medical Lake interchange. And it would put it in an area that's surrounded by industrial. So you don't have to worry about residential or downtown. So it was an idea that was floated and I thought, well, I'll investigate and find out.
So you recall, we did an EPF for the site right beside that, the waste energy plant out there. And it went, I think we went through the functional analysis and that's all we had done on it. We didn't complete that one. But we started down that road, looking at that piece of property. So we also had the FAA take an evaluation of it. It was safe as long as towers weren't too high. It was out of the conical zone. It was out of all those things. So it's worth looking at again if that was the direction the board wants to go. Next slide, please.
Just, if I guess, just one clarifying question. You referenced $2 million for the annex expansion. Is that the same as the 3 million for the jail capacity remodel that we adopted in our budget?
I believe it was only two. Was it three? We have three?
It was three in our budget.
It's three that I.
Okay, so it is the same
It's the same
thing.
stuff.
Okay,
All
I
downtown.
wanted to
All
make sure it was the same thing.
Okay.
It wasn't
I had
some
thought it was
other
two.
type of expansion we were looking at.
Everything downtown, whether it's the existing facility or the annex.
Okay.
So next slide, my recommendations is, of course, to keep working with the A&E firm to try to explore those options. Mr. Waldorf to try to get some hard numbers and see what we have to do, as well as any of the, you know, the coinciding, you know, capital improvements we have to do with the increase in capacity. The other one is open up a dialogue to make them aware of our capacity and the challenge that we have. And I would start off with the Spokane Regional Law and Justice Council. Along with that, at the board's direction, if they wanted to have a conversation with the SRLJC Policy Advisory Committee, which I believe you chair, Chris. So, but I don't know that we want to.
So it's your
because-
fault.
Yeah, because ultimately it's a recommendation back to the board, so we could, you could handle it here at the board level. And then, in our ILAs with the other counties or the other cities, there's a contract committee with Don chairs, which is, we have quarterly reports out on everything that's going on with our financials to our stakeholders. That's the group that would be, and then Don is in charge of it, so he would be able to speak to that group as well. So with that, I will go to questions at the end. If you have any more?
Just a question
Mhm.
on the US Marshals. If they've gone down from 30 to 60 something, what are they doing with the extra?
They're moving them. The impact to us is that they're moving them 5 days a week, so they move them to Yakima, Benton, Sunnyside. I think there's other regional gyms that are moving a lot of people. The downside is that it employs a booking area. So they are moving them a lot more frequently.
How's it looking area?
They still have to come back. So I'm going to say we're sending 10 to 20 out a week, send 10 to 20 back as they become trial ready.
Yeah, because of course.
It's actually better for us long-term if we have the space that they're all here. But like I said, them moving in and out of the booking area on almost a daily basis, Monday through Friday.
Is lowering that further one option if we're looking at short-term options while we think about the long-term and the plan going
Yeah,
forward?
and Scott and I talked about that. I mean, if that's the direction that we do that, because those are two outside contracting agencies that we get back to DOC, along with, a manageable, court-ready folks, perhaps, for the US Marshals. So that's what we're looking at. Again, our mindset is to move into the downtown jail, with that population, and to see if we can create enough capacity to do that to get to one facility. I don't know if we will, but that's one thing over.
The other thought I had was, we've discussed in the past. So we may have some folks that are getting released under the book and release kind of standards that, the judge may choose, if we didn't have the capacity issues, to remain in jail for a short time. But we also have folks who are in jail awaiting their first appearance that may end up getting released. So we kind of have also some folks that get picked up on a Thursday, Friday, right? And then they end up in jail over the weekend, and then their hearing's not till a Monday. So I'm wondering if another thing we should look at in terms of numbers, the dollar amount, is the idea of an evening court or a court on the weekends to be able to, using a court commissioner or something. Just, I know that's been a thought in the past, and it kind of didn't get the traction in the past, but maybe with our budget looking the way it is this year, maybe we can get some traction on it with our friends at the courts. Because it could be less expensive. Anyway, it may not gain you a lot of extra minutes, but I don't know.
Yeah, the judges read the PC, the probable cause reports on Saturday, depends if it's a holiday or whatever. They read them remotely. They used to come in, but they read them remotely and do release some, not a ton. Majority have to wait till Monday in court, but there are releases. over
I
the
know that
weekend
the
as well.
judges do, there are judges on call that do some of that.
Yeah.
So I don't know what those numbers look like, but it's just another thought of what would the cost be to have court on a Friday or Saturday in order to
You need transport as well. We need officers to do it as well. You need transport, and even if it's a video court, we do need to move the offender somewhere, so.
would that be some overtime for officers?
Right now, we don't, we are still, as of today, 19 or 20 staff members short and another, I think, 12 in training. So the 20 is even a little.
So there could be some staff challenges there, okay.
There would be, it would be one of the challenges.
And you'd have to have courtrooms, you'd have to have security out here, you'd have to have some other things as well.
So during the budget process, the prosecuting attorney indicated that if we funded him, he would bring back ECR. And has that happened yet?
Not happened yet. We did have discussions, and I'm ready when he is. We need to meet with the judges. Differentiated case management is basically what it boils down to. And so
That would be the other thing that would actually free up some jail space and, actually improve the system. So can we find out where he's at?
I'll follow up on that.
It's 10 to 10. He could start it at 10 if he wanted to.
Is that the same as? So it's a conditional really conditional.
Early case resolution.
Oh, early case resolution,
So it's where the prosecutor, the public
right,
defender and
right.
the courts
cause
the partner to be able to process these things much quicker than having to go through the court system.
that happened, that happened for many years.
It did.
It happened.
Kind of after the blueprint for reform.
David, and
It was we created it after the blueprint, but it was actually the model out of Hillsborough and outside of Portland, where they do it. It's very, very effective down there. I've been down there. I think Commissioner Cooney's been down there. I don't know whether you've been down there or not, but it's a very effective program. And they go from ECR into supported release and
Right, and that's what I was thinking of
Yeah.
thinking of the supervisor, well, I know there's two different. Is it supervised release is what we're adding somebody
yeah,
in?
monitored release.
Trial. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's another, like, what would the cost of adding? If the prosecutor was willing to do that and we were to add a couple of those folks in pretrial services that would be supervising.
You mean supported release?
No, the
Supervised.
not the supporting.
Not the.
I
Supported-
just, a lot
supported
of
didn't
people
work.
say supervised
No, but
when
supervised.
when they mean
Monitored.
supported, and it's like,
No.
they're very different,
Very
very
different.
different.
Our monitored release is what our pretrial
Monitored
services,
That's
supervised,
what-
monitored,
Not the one,
sustained.
not the one
not
that
the
wasn't very
district court one.
successful
No.
this last year, the one where that runs through pretrial, because we're gonna hire someone with the MacArthur money for that, right? But I don't know, you could run the numbers on that too, if you had the prosecutor's support. It may be way less expensive to do
And
that.
we do. Katie McNulty's been involved with it from the prosecutor's office all the way. The ECR is a combination of public defenders and the prosecutors, so we're gonna have to sit down and have a conversation with those folks. And really what it's meant, another good benefit for doing it is that the prosecutors have 72 hours to formally file charges. What we don't want for them to do is to use the weekends and those for that, so that you can make the decision sooner. We don't end up holding them as longer if they can close that, condense that down to 72 hours. We were finding that sometimes they would use the weekends along with it to establish the probable cause, law enforcement. So they would have essentially 5 days in, but we were trying to eliminate a lot of that through David's work, and it works. The system works.
The other thing that I know we had discussed, this was a couple of years ago when we were talking about how ECRs could be beneficial, but one of the sort of stumbling blocks that we could run into is on the public defense side, if they appoint, say they put all the ECRs to just a small group of their public defenders, they're going to burn through their case count so quickly. So we need the public defender to be willing to weight those cases lower than a full case. Because I mean, if it's something they can take care of in a matter of hours, if they do a bunch of those, I mean, they could essentially burn up their month's worth of case counts in a couple of days. So, and unfortunately, we haven't really there hasn't really been the desire on the public defender side to weight cases down, so.
One more, as long as we're having so much fun. We were, how aggressively are we now working with work release programs? And is that an opportunity? I was talking to one of the commissioners down in Walla Walla, and he said that one of the things they're doing is that they're, as part of the work program, they're using that to remove fuel in the DNR and parkland properties. And so they're getting a double benefit out of it. They're being able to reduce the risk for fire while at the same time doing work release with the inmates and stuff. So is that or something similar to that? I did talk to the new lands commissioner, and he said he would welcome the opportunity to partner with the county if we could devote some resources to cleaning fuel out of the DNR property and stuff. So just another idea.
And that gets back to the population that's eligible to go out to Geiger and then eligible to be outside of Geiger as well.
Our challenge right now is we are very, very few out on work crew right now. Majority of those inmates either aren't coming in, they're part of the 17% that are booked and released, or they're being released within the first 4 or 5 days prior to going out to Geiger. So we're challenged. At one time, we had 7 crews. Right now, we're sending 2 out. And even the numbers, we send out about 6 on each crew. So about 12 inmates out on work crew right now. And then it was 70s or something like that.
And the community certainly likes our work group program. They always get it. It's very favorable.
Yeah.
We just don't have the right profile of inmates for it, and glad to reduce it.
I didn't see anything in the presentation, but do you have a number on how many inmates are post conviction currently? Has that changed? 'Cause that would-
Sentence, yeah.
could factor into that question, right?
Very low. It's in the dashboard.
Within the dashboard.
Yeah,
Has
in
it-
fact, it
has
was
that
a-
changed a lot in recent years?
Yeah, it has fallen off. We used to average about 200 sentenced prisoners, which is
Okay,
the prime person to be out of Geiger.
That's what I
You
was
know,
thinking.
you see what I'm
or to
saying?
be on work release
Well,
potentially.
Yeah, we're down to like 45 or.
Yeah, it's well under 100 at all times right now. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's
Way down. Yeah.
the 60 or 80 range is a pretty good number. But the other is I'm still concerned about their criminal histories and things like that, because work crews,
Yeah.
it's the most likely of somebody having to walk away. We do have a number in the course of a year, we usually have a handful of walkaways. And so question was, my first question is, hey, what charges are they on and what's their history look like too? Because us as a community, I mean, I'm concerned about detention services and sort of people out, so.
I have a couple things on the population. One of the reasons that Don and Mike worked on reducing the U.S. Marshal population and DOC is we were having the challenges with our populations going up. So that's a flexible population that we can move out so that we can make sure that we're keeping more of the space available for our contract jurisdictions here, all the cities and whatnot. So they've done that. One of the reasons that we are here is we started to see the population grow quite early in our jail and Geiger. Much earlier than it normally has. Usually it starts to go up in the warmer months in the May, June timeframe. This was going up in February. Interestingly enough, the population's going back down, which is
Yeah.
super odd. So that was kind of raising some alarm bells with us, like, oh, if this is the trend, and we'd already reduced the US Marshals population and DOC by like 60 or more, and yet it was still going up. So that was a little bit concerning to us. We do have to, if we do anything with our municipal contracts to renegotiate or change some of the conditions in there, we have to first, one of the things we have to do is we have to get all the US Marshals and DOC out of the jail. So that's our most flexible, movable, lowest, least notification timeframe, right? So Mike had, and then we know the Geiger, all the trust that's hanging over the top of us. Do you put money into it, throw away money? Do you not? And what's the next critical failure that's gonna cause us not to be able to have people out there? So we're just trying to look at all the moving parts and knowing that we have an effort going on to see about increasing the capacity downtown. What would that do post capacity increase? What would they do if something happened with Geiger and we just had to shut it down? And Mike and I looked at this stuff on Friday, and we do think that if we were to say we can't hold the US Marshals and DOC anymore, and we had to move everyone at Geiger downtown with the increased capacity that we believe we could get, as even talking about the annex, we could probably absorb them to downtown. Not now, but by the time we do the improvements. So it's just, we're just planning and just thinking about what if scenario. It doesn't do anything for expanding capacity and changing the book and release, any of that sort of stuff. But we're looking at kind of contingency plans should something, a major failure out of Geiger that renders it unable to use it anymore. So, but one of the things that I think is really important, we're having the conversation here, there's kind of conversations going in pockets in the community. We have a couple of groups that are that meet on a regular basis to talk about jail facilities, jail operations. One is the SRLJC, and another one is our city consortium teams that always meet, they meet quarterly. So we thought it would be good to have this similar conversation with them, start to get the minds working around what the current state of the state is, what are some ideas, ECR, other sort of things that could be happening to help us manage against this, where anything we do is 5 years out for major capital improvements. So we've got to deal with what we have right now. But at least starting to have the conversation so we don't have people surprised, oh, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know you guys were running into those sort of capacity challenges. But if we trip them off there, the SRLJC, the way the commissioner set that up is if they have some recommendations on jail facilities, those would come to the board. And the board has the legislative policy committee that's never met yet, but could be, you could say, all right, I understand. I think those are good, viable. Hand those off to the legislative policy committee to work more. That's then broader. It has more electeds from the city of Spokane Valley, et cetera, et cetera. So at least starting it off with the SRLJC having a conversation on this and sharing this more with our city consortium groups, I think would be helpful so that the conversation is continuing.
That's one of the recommendations. So I'd be looking for a head nod.
Can you say a little bit more about that consortium group? I just never heard of that before.
We call it the consortium. I think we use it in some of our language. So our consortium or all of our city contracts, City of Spokane Valley, Millwood, Liberty Lake,
On
Area
all different
Heights.
contracts.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
All of our cities and towns within Spokane County. They're part of what we call the consortium that have contracted with the county to bring their municipal or their misdemeanors, gross misdemeanors to our jail.
How active is that group? You said they meet quarterly?
Quarterly.
Okay.
Principally to review kind of average daily populations and
Okay.
billings and all that sort of stuff. But
The data from it goes out this week, actually. The data to all the contract agencies and their settle and adjust for the year 24 goes out this week from prices.
Scott, are
So
we?
normally it's more of a financial conversation,
Yeah, but
but
it's
this is.
it's allowing
yeah,
to be
it
more.
says financially,
For the last few years, bed space has been one of the,
yeah.
even probably more so than the
Yeah.
financials has been red light and where's potential bed space everywhere.
Are we statutorily obligated to provide jail services to that consortium?
From what I understand, our statutory obligations are as a county felony only. But by contract, the cities have chosen and we have historically had capacity to allow them to come to our jail and bring their misdemeanor population. So I think it makes sense from being a regional facility for all of our jurisdictions versus them having to send them somewhere else outside of Spokane County. I think that makes a lot of sense for us, but no, we're not statutorily required to. But by contract, we are, and there's a lot of triggering events in there that we'd be to talk through if we were to change something differently with our contracts.
And I think contracted, including the marshals and the DOC, it was like 226 when I looked last time of the population. Okay.
I'll just say, I think it's good to start having some dialogue, information sharing, kind of socializing.
Yeah.
I need to kind of look at the policy advisory committee's role to figure out whether that's the right vehicle for this conversation or not, because it hasn't been active before. So that would be my feedback on that.
And that one would only be tripped if the board tripped it. That would be later. Initially, it would just be SRLJC and the quarterly consortium. And again, it's not, we don't want to go to these things, it's falling, but let's have some conversation. Let's get some wider knowledge around our situations, start to get some more minds around it and see if there's other creative ideas to offer that can help us with our jail population that we're challenged with our jail capacity.
Okay, I'm gonna move forward kind of with the recommendations unless I hear otherwise. It's okay with that? Okay. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have Jeff McMorris, Senior Director of Finance and Administration. 5-year financial forecast. I saw him in the hallway earlier. There he is. Welcome.
We do have a. Is Jim still here? He's still here. One, we found it for the quick one off. Just a quick other budget related thing, Visit Spokane and the logo for Sports County USA. You had a 50,000, you gave them a grant of $50,000 to do Sports County USA.
Out of hotel motel tax.
Separate, there was a separate ARP stuff, we're not talking ARP at all. They.
Did it go directly to Business Spokane or was it?
In the reimbursement
or
way,
was
we didn't
it
write them a check. No, this one went directly to Visit Spokane.
Yes, okay.
They have done a lot of stuff and spent about $22,000. They have $11,000 in additional bills that they billed after the contract lapsed at the end of the year. That'd take them up to $33,000 if the board allows us to extend their contract. That also leaves, 17,000 in round numbers. They have a little bit more legal work to get the trademark of Sports County USA, which was already developed. Completely trademarked that we could use. We could use in our marketing. County, they would use in their marketing. So the question is, the contract that ended the end of 24. Would you guys like us to essentially extend that contract where they can keep spending the money that was allocated to them to finish this off?
I'm fine if they can actually finish it off.
I talked with Rose on Friday. Mr. Maceo here has talked with them a fair amount too. We do believe for under that total of 50,000 originally allocated, that they can get the trademark done. They have missed a deadline, which will slow us down a little bit, maybe cost us a little bit more legal time. Even with that, we believe it will come in under 50,000. Then we've spent money on this trademark being developed. We would have it, we could use it. In the out years, there would be, what I was told, a couple or a few $1,000s expense each year to keep the trademark current. I would assume that could be absorbed within the money the county already provides just to Spokane. But that's a future thing I'm going to make you aware of. The question today is, do you want us to essentially write a new contract, which would continue the old contract? We can't do an amendment to a contract that has lapsed, but it'd be effective like an amendment. And that we would let them finish out that 50,000. We had reimbursed them the 11,000 that's already been done. But technically, we can't reimburse. They spent the money in 24, they just sent us the bill. It all came after contract. So I've heard one yay.
Yeah, I've talked to some other groups in the community that are anxious to try and market and exploit the logo once we've got it finalized and stuff. So we can see the finish line from here. We just got to cross it. And for what we've already allocated, let's just get across the finish line.
A lot of this came in kind of in the Plaza Podium was coming online. Now we're also doing the Plants Ferry. So it is kind of a prime time for us to be marketing our area to youth sports. The economic engine that can be.
I mean, we spent the money to have the logo designed. We did all that. I mean, I think we should at least trademark it and protect what we've already paid for. So it's disappointing it's taken this long, but yeah.
They had some.
Let's get it
turnover.
across the finish line, I
We're back
guess.
now to a more stable business.
And board members, Mr. Maceo, I think Jeff has properly set the groundwork for this. We believe that the original resolution that was passed by the board that allowed the letter of agreement with Visit Spokane can be used to allow the chairperson or the board to sign this new agreement, if you will, because it was very broadly drafted. So we don't intend to bring this matter back in front of the board. We will allow the chair of the board or majority of the board to sign this agreement that we prepared consistent with Jeff's presentation. And so they would use the remainder of the $50,000 to complete the two remaining tasks, if you will, and in a timely fashion. So that's our intent.
They're not asking for any additional money than what we already have.
All within the original hotel motel back 50,000 allotment.
This is Spokane, you're back. Okay.
And the Sports County USA training
Oh,
entertainment site.
Finish your off.
Head nod.
We'll get the logo to you. It's really great.
Better be
Mr.
good.
French, you've had a
Better be good,
presentation
yeah.
when I released it, so
They've shown it to
Yeah,
us. They came in
yeah.
a while ago and showed it.
it's very exciting. So we'll get it out to all the board members just to refresh your memories.
Towards the county.
So now with Jason. I just know this is not rain green.
Shocking.
What? That's why I all sorts of green in here. I'm a Mick, I'm covered.
That's true. You're automatic.
Good morning. So sales tax for February, sales tax collections for February, based on December's sales. Blew it out of the park, actually. That's quite the anomaly. They got 7.3 million. But we only budgeted for 6.8. So we're quite a bit over. Part of that is likely due to like a compressed holiday season, since Thanksgiving was so late, there was a lot more spending in December. But really, doing really well. There is a formula area on the very error on the very bottom. So if you see like the difference in the actual versus budget where it says 0.42 million, it's actually closer to 0.3. So sorry about that. It's just something I missed. But for the actual versus budget, we're 1.6% over. So we're starting off a little bit better than we did previous years.
That's interesting because we got a presentation for STA and its sales tax numbers and we were 0.1% an increase as opposed to 1.5 that we budgeted for. So it was really down
For
low.
December? For the
Yeah.
December
The year?
numbers?
2024, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Or was it November
No,
numbers?
Yeah, you might wanna, it doesn't matter, it is what it is, but it's just difference in the jurisdictions and the boundaries and stuff, but yeah, we were surprised because it was dramatically lower than we expected, so.
This is our best news of the day, so.
So I'm done.
We're starting on a high.
It's much better to be here than there, so no, I'm good.
November wasn't as great. We didn't report on November, but December was fantastic. And next slide. So this is our recap. So you'll see this is based on accrual. So the actual activity and collections for based on 2024 activity. So we were up a little bit over 2023. As you can see on this graph on the right, this is a rolling 12-month percentage change. So 2 years ago, we were trending at like almost 7% growth. Last year, almost 2%. And then as of this last month, we're down to 1.2% growth. So it's definitely taking a sharp turn downward. Next slide. And then for the sectors, again, this is based on for the all of 2024, retail trade was up right about 1%. And that's our largest economic sector. Construction was down 1%, and accommodation and food services was down 3%. Something to note though is like both of those sectors did show an improvement towards the end of the year. So earlier in the year, they were much more down than they are now. Next slide. Non-residential building still not doing great, down 24% year to date. The residential building though, is 4% over year to date, and that's showing improvement every month. So we started the year off pretty low, and it's getting better. The architecture billing index, as you can see on the graph on the right, still it's not looking good. So for the next 9 to 12 months, it's anticipated, at least for building, it's not going to be so hot. So next slide. New car dealers or the automotive sector. New cars were up 1%, used cars were down 10%, which is a little bit high because they usually fall somewhat in line.
The
For the year.
dynamic is changing naturally,
Yeah, it's great.
just shifting totally the other way.
Yeah. Other motor vehicle dealers down 10%, but if you remember earlier in the year, we were down like 30–40%. So that made a big recovery. Last month was a little bit of a dip, but end of the year, much better than we expected earlier in the year. And then auto repair and maintenance up 2%. So pretty flat. Next slide. Restaurants stayed pretty flat. So full service restaurants up 1%. Places to drink up 2%, and limited service restaurants up 4%. And then again, the snacks and non-alcoholic beverage, you have the weird dips because of a reporting issue. So next year, that probably shouldn't see that as much. Pretty flat. Slide.
So in the limited service restaurant, I understand now that a hamburger just comes with the bun, no meat. Really
Some people
cutting
play
back
extra
on
carbohydrates. Next slide. Okay, area of concern, right? So even though sales tax was great,
That's how you order your burgers, right?
But even the special burgers are expensive.
Oh, yeah.
so even though February collections were really good, this is the area of concern. So you see on this graph that we pulled from the New York Fed, the yellow line, it's a little hard to tell. That's real credit card debt, like the time value money factored in, right? So you'll see that the gray line is the amount of debt, the yellow is in real-time dollars. The blue line, however, is the amount, the delinquency rate. So the delinquency rate is increasing, it's rising really quickly. And with the real dollar value staying about the same, that's just, people are going broke really quick. Their capacity to spend is getting diminished.
Exhausted.
Yeah, yeah, exhausted. That's a great word.
Yeah.
And then today, I didn't have time to put it in a slide because it just came out today. The New York Fed, for their Center for Microeconomic Data, they had a thing that they talked about the rejection rates for mortgage refinance applications. Right? So for the people that are trying to refinance their mortgage and they're getting rejected. Last year, it was 26.7% in February. And this year, just came out today, is almost 42%. So we go from 26% to 42%. So rejection rate. Right. So part of that is going to be due to if their credit situation is not good, which is that blue line, they're overspent, so they're not able to refinance.
So the other precursor to this will be the end of April in terms of how many people can afford to pay their property taxes and how many of the property taxes are paid for by credit card. And so I'm not looking forward to the end of April. I think it's going to be a very, very difficult time for a lot of people. I'm already getting phone calls about tax increases.
And then next slide to recap. So for 2024 collections, we were at 78.6 million. We had budgeted for 79.3. So we were a little bit under, but we were less than 1% under. So forecast wise, that's, even though it was low, that's pretty spot on.
Yeah.
That's the best we've done in quite a while. The year before, we were 1.1% off. I'm sure you guys are thinking that's probably when Jason started doing sales tax and it's so close, but that has nothing to do with that. That's purely a coincidence. for 25 year to date, we're at 13.6. We had budgeted 13.4. So again, 1.6% over what we budgeted for the year. So that's where we're at. Yes.
On the 2024 total, remind me, what was the percentage change from 23 to 24?
The percentage change, I believe, was 1.3%.
Budget 2, right? 2%, yeah.
Yeah, it's.
Okay, now we're gonna, if there are no more questions on this, we're gonna morph into the 5-year forecast. Which we have named after GFO's cover story, GFOA's cover story, Let the Budget Games Begin. We'll reference his article as we go. One thing, just want to call out, we are heading into a big contrast right now. The last few years, there was CARES money, there was ARP money, and when you have extra money, it always frees up some other money. There's always ways to use that, and it helps. The extra money outlook is going in the opposite direction, and that's going to impact this year's budget. Things are not super great. We jokingly say we should come into bump music. It's the end of the world as you know it. So
I feel fine.
So this is a little bit of a reality check of where we are. I know we've come around and talked to each of your offices, so not a lot new here. Do want to highlight, I guess, for better or for worse, Randy and his team at the time put together the forecast. They do have a very good track record, as we just talked. So we are fairly confident in our numbers at this point, unless something dramatically changes. One thing we'll be discussing when we go through our budget games. When we reference them, we want to make it clear we're not saying people are doing this with malicious intent. It's just we all kind of go back to some tried and true ways to get funding. When you're in self-preservation mode, you're concerned you're gonna have a cut or even a stagnant budget, which can be a cut in services. And so we will be highlighting some of those as a way that they're front of mind and we can recognize them when we see and hear them. This is a county-wide issue. It's not just the general fund. As we look to what's going on at the federal level and cuts there, a lot of those cuts impacts the state. The state has its own budget challenge, but a lot of federal money passes through the state, so that will compound the state. So a lot of our departments and divisions that are not general fund do rely on grants a lot. So this is a really a county-wide issue. It's also a multi-year issue. We're not just trying to, let's get through 26 because great Aunt Matilda, who I've never met, slowed it and she might pass away in 27 and then it's all good. From a financial standpoint, we'll mourn the loss of great Aunt Matilda, but
She was broke.
we found out Matilda's been out of Northern Bust.
It's all gone.
So at this point, we are not seeing an out year situation. We are looking at a multi-year challenge. So we are going to be here more frequent and more often than in the past. The monthly sales tax that Jason has always done is also going to be a kind of monthly budget update, where we are, where we're going, what we're working on. So with that, we'll put the next slide to Tessa will have.
Alrighty. What you're saying is, where's COVID when you need it?
As Jeff referenced, this is also a state issue. The state governor released a letter probably a couple weeks ago now about the realities of this state's budget situation. Governor Ferguson is proposing a 6% cut to most state agencies and eliminating approximately 1,000 FTEs through attrition and then some currently filled positions. So they will be taking a blended approach there. The governor has outlined 4 key principles for his cuts. Reducing redundancies, assuring efficiencies is probably key. examining spending not yet implemented, rolling back any recently approved spending, and then reviewing any programs that were started with one-time funds, are all good places to start. And then he's also implemented some travel restrictions, going into the future. So 50% reduction in out-of-state travel spending, 25% reduction in in-state travel spending. And then looking at equipment and other services, through a critical lens as well. And as Jeff said, we get a lot of state dollars, we get a lot of federal dollars that pass through that impact all of our funds. So this is not strictly a general fund problem. This is a Spokane County problem. All of our funding sources and all of our funds need to be fully aware of our economic situation.
Sounds a little doji to me.
Not wearing that hat today.
Yeah, we're encouraging people to change their frame of mind out of how do we get by with less, instead of how do I, pitch for something new. It's not the season of adding more. Next slide.
Definitely not. Looking at the private sector, we'll see up here, retail, technology, big oil, aerospace, airlines. I didn't know Estee Lauder had 7,000 employees, but they're cutting 7,000 employees. That's a huge cut. Starbucks 1,000, Chevron is 15 to 20% of their global workforce. That has to be in the tens of thousands, I would think. They're so big. Blue Origin, even the billionaires are cutting back. Kohl's, BlackRock. So this was just kind of a quick Google search to what stood out. But these are some of the reasons why we're forecasting a very flat year. Look at what other economists say. Jason has great sites he follows, but we're also seeing in the private sector. Couple quotes we pulled out, layoffs are remaining low, but hiring is definitely more selective. Attrition and strategic layoffs are being used to manage workforce. And then another one's consumer spending was robust in the holidays, but cooler income momentum points to slower spending through 25. So that's kind of how private sector, and of course, we're a reflection of private sector, since our money comes from spending. Next slide.
Alrighty, and this is our revenue forecast for 2026 through 2030. We did go line by line through the entire general fund, every revenue source and expense category that we have. We have indicated on the screen here, sales tax growth percentages. 2026 is looking at a flat growth for sales tax going into 2026. Property tax, as we know, one of our second or third largest funding source can only grow by 1%. We do have a little banked capacity in our reserves, but not much. And then we have included no such property tax increase at this moment in this forecast. So there is no 1% and there is no road levy shift considered in this. You'll see in the 2024 actuals there, our revenues looked like they knocked it out of the park. That was some of the one-time funding we received from ARP. There was an outlier where we spent ARP dollars down to the general fund to pay for various salaries kind of at the end of the year. So that's an anomaly there, not something we would count on repeating, but that leaves us with some one-time dollars in the bank. Charges for services, we keep typically in line. That's the bulk of that is for our law enforcement contracts, so that we can modify a little bit to keep in line with our wage growth and things, but we're also seeing things like delinquencies at a high rate, so fines and fees, to Commissioner French's point a moment ago, are going to be changing how and when people are paying their bills.
In the upcoming slide, we'll talk through revenue options and then expense savings options. So at this point, we'll go to the expenditure forecast slide. As you'll see, we're 69% salary driven, no surprise. Governments are service delivery, which requires people. And then we average about a 7% increase on salaries every year. Because as you know, unless you stepped out, you usually get 2 steps. If you happen to land on step 12 before step 13, it's a single step in addition to COLAs. So 2 steps plus a COLA is usually about 8.8%. We have a lot of long-term employees, so on average, it's about a 7% increase. And these are labor contracts, so it's not something we can choose not to do. We are contractually needing to do this. Generally speaking, non-reps follow what the reps get, just out of an equity standpoint. So not a lot of wiggle room in wages and benefits. Things we'll be suggesting in a little bit. Looking at attrition as a way to manage workforce, hiring freezes, tightening our M&O. Things we'll need to do, we'll be looking at other categories in a little bit, but this is generally, we're a staff-driven organization. The next slide will show the curve.
So when you lay revenues, in this case, under expenses here, you can see that our forecast is showing a $20 million deficit in 2026. Now, the expense assumptions for 2026 also include $6 million in capital investments. We know we have lots of deferred maintenance on campus buildings, as well as several large technology projects that we need to look at investing in. Things such as the Ascend, ProVal, Aumentum, Assessor, Treasurer, lots of words there, new system. There is the need for a new RMS, records management system for law enforcement. And then there's also other justice system technology investments that need to be made over time.
The shaded area is a 5%, 2.5 on each side of the line. So you can see if expenditures were down by 2.5 and revenues were up by 2.5, it closes, but not fully. It just makes it better. So the next slide, you'll see if we were to close the gap by 10 million this year in a way that is an ongoing, not a one-time closing, due to, kind of like we love compounded interest in our retirement accounts. This would be a compounded savings. So a 10 million savings this year is a $14 million savings in year 5. What was a 70 million hole on the last slide becomes 56 on this slide. And so some of the things that we've, since talking with all of you, your offices, trying to assemble ideas, see where brilliant minds are coming together. Things we're looking at doing, have already started doing, include, attrition. One example, in our IT department, due to some recent efficiencies, we had a staff person who went to Kevin Norris and said, it appears my job isn't needed like it once was. And we were able to find another department that needed a staffer. Today is her first day in that new department. Kevin is looking at doing a bit of an IT restructure, but in the end, it will be one less FTE overall. So we are recommending or kind of implementing a hiring freeze where it would come up through, this would be for departments that report to the BOCC. Separately electeds manage their own budgets. We would recommend to them to do some of these things also, but for departments that report up through Scott to the BOCC, having a hiring freeze. It doesn't mean every position doesn't get filled. It just means we're looking at it a bit more closely. Is there an attrition that would make sense? Do we post it just internally to provide upward mobility for other people so our staff can move around? But at the end of the domino effect, there would be a spot that is no longer right now as a way to have less expenses next year. We're looking at centralizing some support services We have one department that's talking about being willing to take that on. We've started that a little bit already last year, or maybe before that with Courtney in the budget office. All of our smaller shops, even more medium-sized shops, like Courtney does all the payroll for building and planning. They're not small, but for smaller groups, you don't need a person who does that. Courtney does 10 or 12 shops in addition to budget commissioners and others. So continuing that centralization of services and pairing it up with the attrition and internal hirings. Another one we identified is some of our departments haven't taken all the indirects or admin that the county could recover. And it's for a good reason. They're putting it all into the programming. But then the general fund has to pick up those admin costs. So working with departments to make sure all of the admin associated with the grant is billed to the grant to save our general fund. Another one we've talked about is, again, this would just be those that report up to the BOCC, is recovering salary funds each month. So if you spend $100,000 in labor each month, you have a $1.2 million budget for the year. That'd be a very small department. If you spend $70,000 one month, we would move the $30,000 not spent into a contingency. So if a reason comes up at later in the year, you need the funds are still there, but they're earmarked only for benefits and salary. We do have a lot of year-end spending that can happen. The money's available. All the offices have needs. I've been on that side of the fence too and participated in that in the past. We're just at a point in time where we need to be a little more careful, a little less eating out, as they say, more eating at home, saving a bit of money. And then we also, this is more of a project than an implementation today, but doing the work to try to identify what services the county is providing that is not RCW required. And generally speaking, we do those services because the public likes them. And we get that, but I think it's only fair for the board to be able to see that list as you go into final decisions in the fall to see where are our priorities. Unlike the federal government, we do have to balance our budget. And so that's going to require some decisions to be made. So those are things we are currently doing. Yes, sir.
So, in talking to some other commissioners in the state who are having similar challenges, one of the conversations they are having is we're no longer focused on programs and functions that were required by RCWs to do. We're now focused on what are the RCW requirements that we can avoid without getting into trouble. And so they are openly saying, we're not going to do everything their state requires. This one we can be punished for, this one we can't. So we're going to jettison that and just focus on the ones that have repercussions because they just don't have enough money to do it. And so you might want to think about
that to our
adding
list.
that to our metric, which are things that the state would like to have us do, but that, don't really accomplish any function. A lot of that's reporting and stuff like that. Just don't do it and see what happens.
Sort of, is there a defined punishment? Is there a fee?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it's just.
With the slap on the wrist,
Yeah.
maybe you'll want to consider getting wrist slapped.
Well, and just as an example, Josh and I sit on another board and, part of the conversation is, let's pay the fine. It's a lot cheaper than adhering to the RCW. Let's just pay the fine. Take the heck with it and stuff. So it's not just other counties. We're having those conversations here with other agencies.
We'll do our best to point out some of those. I mean, that's definitely a political conversation. That's beyond nuts and bolts of 2 + 2 is 4, but we're happy to point out some of those as we know them. We can talk to department directors and kind of provide a sampling for consideration as we look at the other. But that, I think we've hit them all. The indirects, the hiring freeze, for attrition, internal postings, centralized services, the monthly salary and benefit recovery. Unless you guys tell us to stop, this is what we're kind of doing.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So this slide then has an approximation of all those things you just outlined.
We do have a slide further in the doc that will kind of put some numbers behind each of these options. And as you can imagine, there's multiple ways to get to a solved budget, but you
So
will.
you're just showing
This is an
if
illustration.
you were to reduce it by 10.
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
It's just, okay, so it's not based on that list that you just read off of different
But
options.
we will monetize those options in a bit.
Okay,
I also want to talk about the revenue side of this, because you can balance it from both angles. The 1%, if it were enacted, we met with the assessor's office last week. In round numbers is about 675,000. I think you all know that number. The bank capacity was a surprise to us. We thought it'd be more of a 1-to-1. You haven't taken it for several years, so we were thinking 700,000 a year. Our total bank capacity is 390,000. And I expected it to be, I had the same expression you did, Commissioner. I expected it to be much higher. The formulas, Jim and Chris know their numbers really well. They are on the second floor of Public Works. I'm not even gonna try to recreate the formulas, but I do trust their math as they explained it to us. It makes sense. It's not a dollar for dollar bank. It is, you took X amount of money, you could have taken X amount of money. And when you don't take it, when you take it, it compounds, and you get it every year from there on forward. When you don't take it, it's not quite as straight forward. I'm happy to be proven wrong. But this is every fund that they follow. And so you essentially have just shy of 1.1 million on property tax. And another thing I want to point out, this year's budget, round numbers, is 264 million in the general fund. Our expected revenue this year is 262 million, 2 million less. But that makes sense when I remind you last year we spent 2 million of fund balance to balance the budget. And so with revenues being static, we don't even have enough money coming in for a true status quo budget unless we again dip into our fund balance. If taxes stay up the way our first report of the year showed, that will close the gap about half. A little over 1 million of that could be closed. But we would still start, if everybody got the exact same amount of money last year, 10 million, this year, 10 million, 25, 26, 10 million, we would have to spend 1 million of fund balance to stay on par. The other revenue lever would be the road shift. It's actually 7.5 million rounding, so it was a little higher. We had been guesstimating at 7 even. Talking with offices, it appears a lot of agreement forming around that's a one-time source. Even though you take it every year, it is a one-time source year by year, and applying that disproportionately at least to one-time expenses. That 20 million gap for this coming year does include 6 million of capital, as Tessa pointed out. So you could use road shift or fund balance. I would say the best place to use fund balance is a one-time thing. So then if between fund balance and road shift capital is covered, there's still a $14 million operating deficit. Broadly speaking, on the capital side, you're all very aware of the boilers, which are both antiquated. They literally buy parts off of eBay. You can't get new ones anymore. So we are garage sailing online to fix them. The added benefit of modernizing them is it does meet our first hurdle of clean building requirements. But that's a 35 million. The courthouse roof, hold your armchairs here. $30 million was the first. If we have to do a slate historical roof, if we can do some sort of composite that is slate-like in appearance, which we're hoping is still 14 million. Just think of the labor, the pitches of that
Yes.
roof. When you're still nailing on slate-like tiles about this size with 2 holes, the labor, the manpower. Gil, very good at his job, in my opinion. He has said, I don't know how many have been up on the flat part of the roof. You don't really notice it from the ground. But there's a large membrane like flat roofs have. That can be replaced and needs to be replaced for 300,000, give or take. Gil is suggesting when we replace it, we roll it up the edges where it is, about 2 tiles worth. And that would give us a supply of current slate tiles for replacements as they fall and break. That will buy us more time to come up with the replacement. You thought it could buy us 5 to 10 years maybe. So, you know, glad Gil was thinking that way. I think we all need to be thinking that way in this time frame. But the assessor IT moving to technology, the assessor treasurer is a $6 to $8 million upgrade, and we're holding together right now with duct tape and cable ties. It's a very old system. We've ran $20 billion of revenue through with all of our tax parcels over time. It's antiquated. We have the GEM system, which is a homegrown back in the days of hiring programmers to write the system. And we should be changing to an off-the-shelf system because the mastermind behind GEMS is also getting close to retirement. And if he retires, I guess a lot of information that we need goes with them. So that's another one that we're looking at. So there's quite a few IT and capital projects. So I don't want to recommend skipping capital.
Could I just do a quick follow-up on that? You're talking about the assessors program?
It's a combo assessor treasurer.
Treasurer. Didn't we put some, I thought we put some dollars this year towards that, or no. They were wanting to
They did
hire
present
a,
it.
hire a project person to work on that.
Correct.
Okay, but we didn't actually put that in
Correct.
the budget, okay.
So those are reasons why we do think you should. We think 6 million isn't nearly enough for everything we have.
Good, or 1 second, Commissioner CUNY, did you unmute? I don't think we have a very good connection with you. It sounds like you're trying to talk, but we can't really hear what you're saying.
Okay.
So our thought is on the ideas presented to help close this gap is some have already been implemented, some unless we're asked to not, we'll start immediately. Each month we'd come back and report. You get your sales tax, we'd report on each of those metrics where we're at. If attrition has happened, we'll let you know what those spots are. So if you think we've missed the mark somewhere, you know, we're only going to be into it a few weeks. We can fix it. We can move a different direction if need be. Yes, sir.
How do you expect the hiring freeze piece to be implemented? What does that look like in terms of evaluating positions? Because we know we've got openings in, we just talked about the corrections officers. So how will that look?
So I think Jack kind of mentioned it's a hiring freeze in principle and somewhat practice. Of course, there's going to be some positions that we have to hire for. I think having the messaging out there that says we're going to start more critically evaluating our positions to make sure that there is truly a need there is important. So we start now, so we're starting to bend the curve before the end of the year. I would anticipate that we'll have requests coming through. Right now they come through HR and finance. We will ask our teams, the ones who report up through myself to the BOCC, provide a justification. Some of them will be easy. Correction officers, we're gonna hire, right? But there's others that are gonna need more critical evaluation, and we'll have a justification for it. If the department head feels it's really critical to their operations, they'll have an opportunity to come. We're just thinking about kind of coming to the exec team and do a review of them. So it's a fairly consistent review practice, impartial, and we're looking at those things to really evaluate the true need. And as Jeff said, because this is something we need to start now to start getting us prepared for 2026. We'll have a monthly report similar to what when Jason comes in and does the sales taxes. We'll show you what the tracking is. How many have we been able to reduce and hold? How much are we recovering from our payroll and benefits? So we'll provide that to the commissioner on a monthly basis. That gives you the position detail visibility.
And the letter that Tessa has passed out just shows, it's an article that shows Thurston County is in a very similar place. We've heard the thing from King and.
King County had an article in the Wasac newsletter a couple weeks ago that it's in a very similar place.
15 million.
Yeah, it's just scalable. I think, you know, kind of everyone's in a similar range.
San
as the
Diego's
state.
210 million. I mean, it's.
Within your size of budget, we're all looking at similar percentage challenges. So we're not in this alone, we're not unique. And I would like to point out, we're not in the hole, and we have a fund balance. It's just if we don't start doing something now, give it a year and we will be in a tough situation. So
And that's what this article really speaks to is, yeah, their finance director's done something very similar. We have fund balance, we have had healthy reserves. But if we keep spending like we have been, we'll be done in 2 years.
we're in the same spot. We have enough fund balance to get us through about 24 months at current rates. But if we reduce and close the gap, it gets better.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, so I based upon the numbers you showed earlier, thank you very much. I think our property tax collection is going to be dramatically less than what we've experienced in the past. And sales tax is already trending in the wrong direction. So you could do the shift, but ultimately what that does is hurts the fund that you've shifted from. What Whitman County has got is a levy lift vote that the voters approved, and that's what they're surviving on. But last time we had an updated CRAB, 65% of the counties in the state are using the road shift to be able to balance their budget. And they're running out of shift capacity to balance their budget. That's why they're starting to look at what are things that we can do. What are things that we can not do anymore to try and get ourselves in alignment and stuff? The question then becomes, what are the things that are statutorily required? How do we generate enough momentum? And I can have this conversation. LSC is meeting Wednesday night and Thursday, have this conversation about what is it that the state requires us to do that we do not do, could cease doing and not hurt anything. What is it that we could, stupid stuff we do for no apparent reason. What is it that we could jettison and bring our expenses back in alignment?
Agreed. If we get out of certain lines of business that we don't have to do, and there's agreement to get out of those lines of business, that's an ongoing. But I also said earlier, easier said than done, because most of the stuff we do that we don't have to do is liked. To your point, though, there are definitely a lot of unfunded mandates that come down. Like we are this week figuring out exactly how much compost the county bought last year, whether it was from Spokane County or out of Spokane County, if it's nationally certified, and how much we spent on said compost. Because that's a new regulation that was passed last year. And we found out Kyle's team, thankfully, keeps track of their compost. And so they were able to pull it quickly. We're talking with Parks. We'll get it in by the end of the month. And then we'll be back before you for an official plan on what our compost thoughts are going forward and how we will educate the public on said compost. We thought maybe a utility insert would get us through what we need. And I guess my opinion on this is showing I should do better on that. But
Until we have to start measuring methane out of a cow.
so, and this is one, it's costing a bit of staff time, so it's not exactly a huge savings. But it is an example of things we have to report on. We hire people to report on these things. And I'm sure there's a great intention behind it. One other thing I did forget, when you brought up a levy lid lift, I've heard unanimously this is not the year for it. We know the city's gone out for a big parks levy. The economy is where the economy is, but when and if you choose to look at it, just for your awareness, we can go up to $1.80 per parcel. That is our statutory limit. Millage rates come down as property taxes go up. We are at approximately 70 cents. So that's leaving us $1.10, a huge amount of capacity. Each penny based on this year's assessment is 950,000 rounding. So actually there's $100 million annually of capacity. Huge number. Generally levy lid lifts go out in the nickel and dime range. So that would be a $5 to $10 million annual. If there was interest in looking at that, we are one of the lower taxed counties. We just got our statement last week from Treasurer Bowles. And I think ours said we were between 7% and 8% was going to the county. I've always thought it was 17% in my status. But a lot of the tax bill is not county. Schools usually over half. A lot of that's voter approved. A lot of other voter approved things, our libraries, our firefighters. But just so you know, there is capacity on the levy lid lift side, and a penny, a little under $1 million. I think that's probably the only other revenue trigger at this point that's going to help general fund. There's unique revenues, but then the revenues go to a certain thing versus general government.
Well, how much of our budget do we generally say is criminal justice and public safety related? 70, 75.
2/3 to 3/4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know-
Measure one passed, that would have provided money to that large segment. Of course, it didn't, and it wasn't even close.
Well, no, I just wanted to comment that in other counties that have been dealing with increased expenses and not having a lot of new revenue, those public safety sales taxes haven't they kept Benton County and Yakima afloat pretty much? So anyway, it's just, I know that we've got jail needs. We just heard that presentation. So we've got lots of criminal justice, public safety needs, but we do have 0.2% sales tax out there. Well, depending on the city's sales tax, but yes.
There are those, and we have, housing one we hear about many Tuesdays. So there's things like that. So we'll move here quickly, and time, you want to start off our budget?
So
games?
some of our games that people play, these are the top three. They are the padding play, the crisis card, and selling the sizzle. And like Jeff said earlier, no one does these intentionally. Everyone does them, kind of without knowing they're doing them a lot of times. Tight budgets can cause a lot of stress, and reducing staffing can cause additional stress on those that are left remaining. So we want to give grace and make this as fun as possible, and help hold each other accountable. So as different departments come in, we'll try to provide awareness on what maybe some of the games that we experience might be.
We go to the next slide, a few more, the influence operations, bringing in community influencers, a heart tug. I always think of the 4-H kids at King County. They were cut multiple times in my time there, always reinstated, because those kids give the best speeches. The foot in the door, we all love a good pilot project that then becomes ongoing. The budget low mid-year, we only need $100,000, but come June, it's going great, we need 500 more thousand to finish it off. The whole article is wonderful. Again, if you want to read it, I'll play Vanna White here, Budget Games, available online near you. This is GFOA's cover story for the year. And this is just divine providence. But they also provided 5 bingo cards. So take one and pass it down. We'll get one to you, Commissioner CUNY. As people come and
Have your
tell
whiteboard
you,
marker and you can try to hit bingo.
tell you if you want to hit bingo, we will provide a lovely prize if anybody gets a blackout bingo card.
As you
and-
read through these, I can just rattle off which departments.
And we roll it ourselves a time when it's that project that we enjoy. So, and we do this with a little bit of tongue in cheek and humor, but we all go there. And I think if we're just kind of aware of it and think about it, and we all hold each other accountable. For Jeff, you're being a little influence operation here, bringing in so-and-so. Just to kind of keep it a little bit more real, because, you know, if this was your family budget, we'd be saying no big vacations this year. We're not getting that new car. Those white kitchen appliances are great. I'm not talking the new flat white with the gold. I'm talking the old 80s white. We don't need to go stainless, you know, no eating out. We need to tighten our belts. And then we have 2 more slides we'll hit quick.
Alrighty, this is kind of outlining a budget approach for the year for target-based budgeting. So we've started here with our revenue forecast. This again came from GFOA. It's a great follow-up article to the news magazine that we got. So we have developed our 5-year forecast and kind of we're now heading into setting targets for core services. So core services are things that we would consider statutorily required or critically essential to helping our government operate. So what are we spending on these core services and how can we stay in alignment with our revenue forecast for the year? So coming in April to a budget meeting near you, we'll bring a first quarter follow-up report, some updated sales tax information, and then we'll hopefully start talking priorities for the year. We're very much now live in our budget season. And we'll come in with some different topics and thoughts on some priorities to help us form a letter that we kind of draft annually to help departments budget their core services. And then potentially in the fall, given how we set our targets, request do decision packages for supplemental services, things that may be slightly above and beyond a core service. And that would be the meat and potatoes for what the budget process ends up looking like before we finalize in December, which seems like we just did it, but we'll be there soon enough.
Next slide is our final slide. This is the one I mentioned a little bit earlier, to monetize. We think back to the governor's budget priorities letter, which I think was a very normal approach to people in charge of budgets. I'm going to start in the middle, the vacant positions. So as of, this was pulled on 2/15, there were 106 general fund vacant FTEs. The bottom 3 numbers are subsets of that. So 21 of them have been vacant over 6 months, 15 over a year, 12 over 2 years. I would make the case, without knowing those 12 exactly, we've learned how to function. Is it time to remove them from the budget? Our average FTE fully loaded with benefits is between 100 and 120,000, depending on the department and the position. So the monetize, if we were to cut all 106, which we are not proposing, but if we were just to strip out every vacant FTE today, that would be a $10 to $11 million. So even if we did them all, which I don't think anybody here would think is reasonable or realistic, we're not all the way to our $14 million nut. So move over to the right.
Just to clarify, the 106 vacant FTEs, I would assume some of them are not funded
And
in the current budget.
so that is our
Sorry.
first, thank you for the
More
segue.
complicated.
So as we move from PeopleSoft Workday, PeopleSoft being home built was built to allow for unfunded FTEs. And when we talk FTEs, we have our unfunded FTEs, our funded FTEs. I'm used to calling them phantom FTEs when they're unfunded. That was our King County lingo. Workday is built on best practices. If you have an FTE, it's funded for that year. And they encourage us to move to more of a system where if you're not going to fill it for the year, remove it. It might be removed for a few years. That might be reality. If we need it next year, we put it back. And so we are suggesting that for those of these that are unfunded, which is what, 20 to 30% maybe, that we do start actually removing them from the system. So as the budget letters go out, people know exactly how many FTEs they have that are funded. If they need more next year, let's just make the case for it and not have a unfunded FTE category. Now for departments reporting to other elected officials, they would complete this year with their budget as is. But we would like to start removing, talking with department directors, confirming which are the unfunded, removing them. So doing the BOCC side this year, as we go into 26, make it a county-wide process. It'll work much better in Workday, our new system software. And we're hearing a lot of that from GFOA and other national organizations, WASAC, encouraging getting away from the unfunded FTE. I think for some department directors, it's going to be a fear is gone, it's never coming back. And that's within the realm of possibilities, of course. It's also within the realm of possibilities they double or triple their total workforce. But bottom line, I think I've heard so many conversations around this table. What's the funded one? What's the unfunded one? We'll all be on the same page if we just know when we talk in FTE, there's money behind it. And if we need another one, that also means we need to put the money behind it. So that's another thing, unless we're being told to stop, we're going to start. And of course, we will provide those to you guys. So you'll know exactly what they are. And if we do one incorrect, we can put it back. And then moving over to the left-hand side, travel, training, conferences, that's $1.4 million annually. And that's just the general fund side. So if we were to apply the governor's metrics there, that could be $500,000. That could be 4 FTEs we save by traveling less. Now, things zeroing it out doesn't make sense. There's a lot of people who need certifications, they need to be updated. But I think some significant reduction there could make sense. We did the same PowerPoint, save the last 2 slides at Leader Up last week. And we also gave them a fictional budget to solve on. And it was quite interesting as Tessa and Scott and I walked the room listening to the small group conversations. There's a lot of, what is professional services for us? We have that question. And it's different things to different people. But I think it's one that over time, we need extra money for a consultant this year. The case is made, they get the money, and then in future years, it becomes part of the baseline. It stays in. And I don't begrudge that if we all need more money. You know, if you guys give me a raise and forget to take it back, I'll keep it. If it was meant to be a 1-year raise and it's not illegal. But say, yes, sir.
Can I ask on the, can we give me detailed information on these, like, so we can look at the travel train, like, can we break it down by department? Can we see within those departments, what were the actual, you know, what were conferences, what were trainings, what were this and that? And then I was gonna ask, like, professional services, there's been instances where we've had, like, I'm trying to think recently, like when we were talking the franchise agreement, with cost. So there was a gentleman on there who was from a private company that would he kind of fit into that?
Yep,
line
either there
there.
or legal services. We
Legal-
also have a
okay.
category for that.
Okay, and I know, I mean, that there have been different lawsuits we're in where we don't necessarily have someone in-house that has the specialty in the type of lawsuit where so would that fall under that professional services category as well? Okay, so there is a legitimate, like,
Oh, yeah.
well, we have no other option,
a
like
lot
we
of us legitimate.
cannot do it, but I mean, with a number that big, I mean, there.
But even if we just can cut
Maybe we need to look a
10%.
little more creatively on how we do it.
We cut that category by 10%, that solves
A lot of money.
10% of our $14 million
Yeah.
nut on the operations side.
Mhm.
And I think a 10% cut would be very realistic based on what we know
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
More details might change opinions. Extra help. Now, half of that number is elections and parks. Pretty sure they need to keep there unless we're gonna close parks. We have all this summer extra help there. Elections need to continue, unless there's any choices there. But that still leaves 700,000. We had one department director let us know a few years ago, this person received a 30,000 extra help during COVID. Never was asked for it back. They've been getting that 30,000 every year since, kind of like that FTE, we'll go to the padding play. They knew they weren't gonna use extra help some years, but they also knew they could spend the money in a good way. I mean, I'm not begrudging how it was spent, but it might have not been what the board was expecting. So I do think there could be some extra help if we look at those. Overtime cuts both ways. We don't want to cut so many things that we end up spending more on overtime. So there may or may not be a savings in overtime, but at 8.5 million, I think it's something we should look at. Where is that perfect sweet spot? Sometimes it might be cheaper to hire another deputy. We know our law enforcement's a big overtime user, sometimes that extra person actually could save money, so we want to look at both sides.
So these numbers do not include changes in caseload standards.
No, sir.
So that's a death bill to us.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Financially speaking.
Financially,
yes.
that would be a death bill to us. Okay.
These are all budgeted for 25.
Can I ask, do we have a timeline on that yet?
I spoke with Victoria, Counsel for Defense, at Leader Up last week, and she said that there was some follow-up questions that were asked and some kind of extensions. So still solving on.
I guess still a nice agreement work.
Okay. But are we thinking we'll know by the end of the year? Or is this something we may not find out until the middle of 2026? I mean, do we?
Just don't know.
We did, okay.
Yeah, it's up to
Yeah, the WASAC is negotiating aggressively to try and make sure that this does not happen and has made OAC aware that, this counties can't afford it. And so it's part of the overarching conversation as well as indigent defense and what's going to happen there. So I will know more after this trip that somebody else is paying for.
Good cover, sir.
Wednesday, Thursday. So I'll let you know next week, Actually, I won't let you know next week because I'll be in DC next week.
Shortly thereafter.
Yeah, I'm gone till the April 15th. So.
And then on the other side, under deeds versus wants, some of this comes from the governor's letter, some of it is our ideas, but it's the, reviewing those one-time projects because they often become ongoing and they're often good for the community. Is that a priority right now? Examining our core versus supplemental, back to the whole RCW conversations. And then the salary benefit recovery for the BOCC departments we talked about that we plan on implementing. So our next, I think the 17th of April.
Can I ask, do you and your team, do you guys have a list of pilot or one-time projects?
We'll have to go look through and,
Have to.
Okay.
because I know, yeah,
Because that would be interesting to know. I mean, how much money is tied up in, these pilot or one-time project, and how many of these pilots have been going for multiple years and have kind of morphed into.
Well, like what one
Permanent,
that
you
just,
know.
we just heard from VOA, the homeward bound programs out of money again. You know, it was under their pilot. We've done a second and a third year, or I think second year, third round of funding. I think a case could be made. There's been possibly some money savings on the back end. So they're one of your bingo cards, the ROI ruse. Is the ROI really real? These will become vernacular by the end of the year. You know, that's one I could certainly assume the numbers could point that out. I've not done that analysis to know, but that would be an example of a recent. Commissioner Walden?
Oh, I was just gonna say, and maybe that can be wrapped into our upcoming funding through our actual housing dollars rather than general fund.
Exactly. Is there available sources that we actually have capacity? Moving stuff out of general
Because I think they were presenting that there are different options and it would fit into one of our priority areas.
So.
Yeah.
So, but looking at those, and to your point, seeing, is there another revenue source that would make more sense for multiple reasons? So your budget, consider this budget season opening day. We'll be back monthly with kind of what we're going to be implementing, showing you how it's impacting both this year's budget and what it would be on an annualized basis in 26. Also provide you guys real-time correction points. If we've done something you'd prefer to go a different direction. We said we want to get the letter out in May, June timeframe. So we'll be trying to push on next month on priorities, kind of getting a sense of how you guys want that letter to land, to feel, that sort of thing. And then we'll just keep moving forward. But the hope is right after Labor Day, when we officially start that final budget formal process, that we'll have done some stuff that will say, you know, we're talking to $14 million now. It's hopefully significantly less based on bending the curve throughout the year. I think it'd be a pipe dream to say we'll have it solved by then. But, you know, a $5 or $10 million hole is a lot easier than a 14 million. I have no idea where we can get it, but we can certainly get it less than 14.
Well, I gotta tell you, I'm not encouraged when you say, consider this as opening day, and I think it's like the Mariners or the Cubs. I mean, I think I've got another losing season.
Opening days, a hopeful time.
Lots
It's
of.
season of hope.
It's just St. Patrick's Day, there's a little bit
Whole
of
season is in front of
festivity.
you.
It will find that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Right here.
And a little leprechaun will bring us a new revenue source that doesn't cost the taxpayers anything. And life is wonderful. But yeah, so it is a rough year we're going into. I was teasing Randy as he just got back from a Palm Springs golfing trip. I'm like, great timing, Randy. He was tan, looking good.
Could I ask, you know, and I'm under no means am I, or I'm not saying bring all this money back, or, you know, cut all these, but how much is spent on outside agencies? How much do we spend? I'm guessing around 3 point something?
Oh,
I believe so, yes, by the time you add them all up.
3 point something? Okay, so just another, you know, some of it I think is mandated, but not.
Now, that's a list we've already
Not very
discussed
close to all of
that
it.
we need to bring and have a conversation around, see where it fits in your priorities.
Yeah.
And I think part of the year leading up to September will be reminding, we all get busy and forget the details, trying to get those details in your mind again. So as you start prioritizing, you can have a better front of brain memory of what dollar amount is what to plug in places.
Another thing, several years ago, you know, our budget department, I think, got a list from MRSC. They had it. I don't remember which county it was. It was some county on the west side that had done an analysis that looked at sort of everything they do. And I mean, every line item, every service they did, and connected it, whether it was related to, if it was statutorily required or if it was discretionary. I don't know if they've updated and done a new one, that this was maybe
We'd love
my.
them to use us as the county, so
Yeah,
we don't
no,
have to do the
no,
work.
that'd be great, but no, this was my first or second year on the board, so I mean, several, and at that time, I think it was a few years old, so.
We can try to find it,
but-
because there's stuff there, it could be a starting place.
It might be something to help you guys, I mean, to be able to go, I mean, someone's already done the work to show. Yes, this is required, here's the RCW, this isn't required, but, so just something, it was interesting at the time to go through and just kind of have a little guide there to help, so. Commissioner Jordan?
Have we ever identified services as core or supplemental, or would that be a new framework?
It would align towards this framework Josh is describing. We've done something where we had departments outline discretionary versus mandatory. The vocabulary being the changing thing there. I think some people didn't understand what truly mandated means. RCW may describe that you must accomplish something. The manner in which you accomplish it is discretionary. You have to pay payroll. ADP can pay payroll. There's certain nuances to how some of these things could happen. Not saying that that's the way you go, but we kind of approached it from that perspective, and I think it was challenging for departments. So we're gonna try it with a new lens and some different perspective on the.
We did spend about 2 hours on budget, a leader up on Thursday with probably 45 department directors across the gamut. Some elected officials are there or people representing them. So we are doing our best to make sure we're on the same definition page, kind of to your point, that, we might not consider this a core service, but we still have to do it. So what do we have to do? There might be more than just 2 layers to that, but working on that, working on bringing the county along. The budget letter this year, we have some thoughts we'll present in April on maybe a different way to approach it and force us to that same page. And so we're going to try to up it a notch. Necessity is the mother of invention, and we just have to have some savings.
Just a follow up, and thanks. That'll be interesting to see how that definition plays out in dialogue with the departments. This is very general fund focused, obviously, as it should be. And we're looking at an environment of potential cuts, state and federal.
So
How do you plan to keep us informed about those impacts?
we're working closely with Heather in the grants office, with Shannon in Public Works, a huge grant receiver. Law Justice gets quite a few grants. So we're trying to, Justin Shaw is very grant driven, as is George and housing. So we're communicating with them often and frequently. We made it very clear last Thursday at Leader Up that those of you sitting in the room that think you can just take a nap now because this is general fund, it's not. It is countywide. And some of these grants departments could have bigger swings. They could lose half or more of their funding or not be touched, so they might be in a better place in the general fund. They might end up in a significantly more challenging space in the general fund. And at the federal level, it changes day to day. So it's also hard to know exactly where we're going. So you might have to do a lot of pivots and turns. We do know now, I think, with the federal CR through September, for better or for worse, we know we are in a set budget for the rest of the year. We also know we are not receiving our earmarks in 25. So there is some consistency through September, but we'll be following the federal budget process. In theory, they'll pass a new one before October 1st. I don't know if they've done that in a lifetime number, but in theory. And then, the state will have a really good feel in the next 2 months or less. Where I think April 27 is sine die, so we're actually down more than 6 weeks. So we'll have a good sense of what's happening there. And I think that'll also foreshadow how they deal with expected federal pass-through dollars. Will give us a feel for their expectations on that, which could play and give us solid guessing game, anything future focused is. We try to use the best data we can.
Commissioner Waldron.
So what are so you talked about some short-term steps. And then developing this letter that would go out to all the different county departments. So are you looking for, so the short-term steps are trying to make some
savings now. It'll be a softer way. Attrition is so much better than other options. So doing things now that don't impact our staff. That will solve on in the future, financially speaking. Those are the things we're looking to implement now. This fall, we'll see exactly where we are and what has to be done. We do a budget letter every year, but it's been a little more generic. And I'd say, I don't think the letter says it, but we all tend to budget historical plus. And these are our new exciting things we want to do. And we need to flip that paradigm. If you got probably, quite honestly, the winners this year, speaking budgetary winners and losers, are going to be the people that get the same dollar amount. They got 50 million last year in 25, they get 50 million in 26. And we know that if it's the exact same dollar amount, they're the service kind of one way. And how that gets played in the different budgets. And then when we're looking at really the same dollar, if that 51 million goes up to 52, that means all the other departments are losing 2 million unless we're spending down fund balance. And so just setting the stage, this is not the year to be bringing in new programs unless there's a proven cost savings implemented with it. And it's why we're starting early. It's why we donated the last leader up to it. It's only fair in my worldview to let people know where we are as soon as possible, have more conversations, as much transparency as we can do. If any departments want to come in and chat with us, we're happy to sit down and look through things with them. If any of you as commissioners want to do the same, we can do it with you guys too. So we want to do this together jointly to the best of all our ability to spend our taxpayer dollars as wisely as possible. But I think we are going into a year that not every good idea will have money.
I think it's important too that if we're gonna make reductions to outside agencies, we let them know in advance too,
It's
because
only fair.
most of those outside agencies actually draft and adopt their budgets before we do. So we need to let them know ahead of time. I mean, not necessarily on our schedule, which is first week of December. Many of them are adopting in November, so we want to let them know, as early as possible.
September at the latest.
Yeah,
probably.
but by saying, hey, you're probably gonna be at or around this dollar amount,
So
not this dollar amount.
So having like a check-in in August to see how much we've been able to find in different savings over the next, April, May, June, July, 5 months, 5.5 months.
I
It
mean,
was a mid-year.
yeah, because Commissioner Waldron, think how early the health district starts solidifying theirs. I mean, it's
The September early.
much earlier than we solidify ours here, so.
Is September early enough for a final, or do we need to back it up to late summer?
I mean, I'm sure they would appreciate as early as possible, but I mean, if logistically we can't do it till September, then that's just gonna have to be the reality.
Well, yeah, and I was just gonna also suggest we maybe get that letter out earlier than June 1.
Yeah, it's going to be.
That's why it's gonna be that'll be on the
Okay.
April
So I
agenda.
think we just need to let everyone know. I appreciate the leader efforts and getting people thinking, but then
Yeah.
like getting it out earlier and then to the outside agencies too, like you're saying, maybe getting letters out to outside
It's a letter
agencies.
forecasting.
Just saying, hey, we're looking ahead, we're concerned about the way things look and So let us know, and then they need to also get back to us have a conversation about it.
If they want to come in and chat with you, that gives time for that.
Especially if any of them are planning on hiring based on what they think they'll get from us or expected.
Our hope is to have enough info back on April 17th that we can create the letter, shop it around, and then as soon as we get the thumbs up, even get it out in early May.
Okay.
Or late April if it goes out quickly. But early April, we don't have a meeting because of spring break, so April 17th is kind of our next available.
3.4 million is what we spent and budgeted for outside agencies. I think it's very fair to say there'll have to be some reductions there. We're not going to get to our budget without it. So the sooner we do that in the year, the better. One thing I just want to emphasize, we don't have a budget deficit today. We have the commissioners adopting a balanced budget for 2025. This is a forecast that shows we have to do something so that we can continue to operate on a balanced budget.
We have about $35 million in fund balance. The board can choose to use as you see fit in the best way. But if we were to go status quo and make no changes, we have about 20 months that would be down to zero, which is very similar to the Thurston projection. So we don't want to spend our savings. And there's more money available beyond that too, actually. We have our rainy day fund for keeping our bond ratings. That's more what I call the checking account, not our total net worth as a county that's cash flow available. I know there's other people we should.
Do you need direction from us from here? Do you know where you're at?
As long as you're good with what we've said that we're planning on going forward. I'll say hearing, no stopping.
So we'll see you in exactly 1 month. then,
Exactly
right?
1 month the day I think it is, and we'll let you know where we've progressed to that point.
Good.
If you want mid-time check-ins, you know where we're doing.
Thank you for all you're doing.
And we'll be back in their miscellaneous. We need to talk earmarks, the feds have opened their portals message.
All right, can you send Aaron in as you walk by the small conference room? Welcome, Aaron.
Hello.
It's great to see you in person. Not on the little square on the TV.
I know last time you practically did my whole report for me, so.
All I did was read the headline that Gina typed up and you're like, that's it.
Yeah, Shazam. Well, we have brought a special guest with us today, all the way from Chicago. This is Charlie Johnson with Johnson Consulting. And we have been working with Charlie and his team about the last 5 or 6 months on a long overdue economic impact study. The last time we conducted a study was 20 years ago. So we've definitely got new, fresh, exciting numbers. The neat thing about Charlie is like fairs are his jam. It's his business. So he'll lean into that today, but I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Erin.
You've got all awesome.
Hi, my name is Charlie Johnson and I'm president of Johnson Consulting. And Washington State's been a very good state for us because you care about your fairs. We just finished working in Cowlitz for their master plan and Evergreen in Sonoma for their master plan. So a lot of times there's debate. We see fairgrounds being coveted by other land uses. And I think the importance of these types of studies is to illustrate the importance of these types of projects. There's 3,000 some odd counties in the country, and there's 2,500 county fairs. So it gives you a sense, and they're not going to go away. So I think that the repositioning of these, and then sometimes they're not thought about at top of mind like a road is or something like that. And so the defining problem on these is capital dollars. And so that's the reason these types of studies are undertaken. We have actually working with a trade organization called IAFI, and we're actually doing it nationally. Because they are trying to get federal understanding. These are often the biggest emergency locations in counties. So we see FEMA dollars coming in to help stabilize these for emergency and things of that nature. Yours is unique in that, one, you've conquered the operational side. A lot of times fairgrounds may have 1 or 2 employees. And the way they operate it, the county says, go operate that. And they give the keys to them. Maintenance from parks comes out and fixes it. Maintenance from the other parts of the county come out and fix it. That's not a good way to operate a fairgrounds. So you've made that shift and you have a professional management team there that really runs the operation there. That's a good thing. All right. And we see that not being the case. The other unique thing about your fairgrounds is urban. So Calgary, Denver, 4 or 5 other cities have urban fairgrounds. There's a choice. You want to make it really special and to kind of bring things urbanity to the country, to urbanity. Those are questions you need to ask. That's something that's quite popular. Those downtown fairgrounds are doing fairly well. So if yours is in an urban setting, a lot of times let's move it out of here because we want to use it for other things. The other idea is to use it as a vehicle to upgrade all the other areas by bringing the attendance in. You bring basically double the attendance at the baseball field, just to give you a sense, and your demands throughout the year. So I'm going to go through a few slides with those introductory remarks, and I'll tell you why I believe that. What you see on the screen there really relates to what these are all about. They're bigger grounds. They have facilities that can host people. And, when you attract, 600,000 people a year, you have to have the facility to be able to service them properly. So that's what this is all about. How can is the fair important? Is the fairgrounds important? And what does it mean to your economy? So on the next slide, slides up so I can see. The slide after that really gets you into what you're doing in terms of volume. You really have 2 categories of demand. Your fair is what is often known, but these are event grounds as much as anything else. And you do more business on your non-fair business than you do in your fair business. As you see, you almost do 2 events a week. They have different characters. It doesn't spread out like that. You have very busy Marches and very busy Octobers. And you're busy kind of throughout the year, but the overall goal is trying to get that level of demand higher. So you're doing more events throughout the year. That really helps stabilize the nature of the operation. So in terms of attendance on the next slide, you can see that obviously 2020 was bad, but the amount of people that you have for your fair and your non-fair, I think is equivalent to a football game, a football stadium, a soccer stadium, but these are different kinds of people. You'll have all kinds of events happening, bridal shows to the fair. So in Fort Worth, they call their fairgrounds the cultural district. Believe it or not, they put a high-end art museums around that, but they run it as a fairground. So it's interesting to see that clash of cultures that really kind of is flavorful for a community. So that's what we're seeing, how this kind of attendance can be utilized to lever certain redevelopment things that can happen in your community. On the next slide, we really speak to what it means from out of town visitation. And when we say out of town, over 75 miles, and they would all have a possibility of staying overnight. So we look at this and, it's pretty darn good. You get over 20% up on average of all your visitors coming from outside the market. And when you bring Idaho dollars in, those are new dollars to the state. And you have a program that's not for this facility, but public facilities districts. Washington State has been ahead of the curve in terms of trying to push these types of facilities using their local state sales tax. Not applicable here, but the same principles apply. When we get to the tax number, you'll see that the state is always the big winner in these types of projects, just the way the nature of the tax is. On the next slide, we don't see at grounds like this doing $4 million in terms of net revenues. That's a very good fair. You're in the upper quartile for the size of your fair. I think that that's something to be proud of. The fact that you own and operate your own fair, it's not a tenant, gives you some seamlessness, also increases the nature of the quality of the other events that you do, because you do the fair, which is a sophisticated event, makes you able to do other events equally. So, you know, you bring in the fair really does carry a lot. So it brings a lot in to help smooth out the operation financially for the year. On the next slide, you know, we're seeing the volume of the non-fair events, not quite the scale, but still critically important. And this is where more of your visitation comes from. So these are really important, and it gives you velocity throughout the year of having events there. So now we're going to move into the economic impact and what it means to the county from a financial standpoint. So after the economic impact slide, we have 2 more slides to push forward. There we go. This is our methodology. There's a firm in Portland called Echo Northwest, very well done, very good company. We work with them a lot. There are 2 types of economists. There's the egghead economists that will do the, you know, colleges, the Air Force wants to build a new base somewhere. That's what they do. We really specialize in tourism. So our economic impact models are based upon the tourism model. And we use very good statistics. And then basically we look at the people, individuals that come through there, how many friends they may be bringing. So we can try to get a total population. And then we figure out how much they spend by category. And once we figure that out, then we can kind of understand where they're coming from, how much they bring to the economy. And then this is a $6 million a year operation anyway. So you have a $6 million business happening on that campus. And then you have the impacts for what the people bring. So our methodology really thinks about the state tax system, the local taxes that you all get, and then we calculate that based upon the attendance. Is it 100% accurate? It's only as accurate as her attendance information is. And oftentimes it's pretty, we see bad quality of information. Yours was pretty well sophisticated. I think you figured out how to measure things pretty well. So I think from a competency standpoint, we had a good data set to start with. And that's important because a lot of times we have to make decisions. And the nature of the events, the fair, you all know completely. Other times they're tenants, so you may not get the 100%, you know, like Car Show, for example, they give so many comps out that, you know, they just are throwing them out to families and friends and all that. They may not get measured. So we have to really, that's where Placer AI comes in to help, kind of supplements the facts and figures that we get from the management team. So we apply this, and on the next slide, we illustrate that. It's hard to see, but we talk about the nature of these figures and where we really got them from. So this is our source document. It really tells us where we sourced it. So if we had to make an assumption, or we clarified where we've made the assumptions. And when we look at this, we'll see, you know, we have all these variables that we got from management or we developed ourselves. And these are key inputs and they're big numbers. You know, is it as big as a Toyota manufacturing plant? No. But is it as big as a retail operation? Yes, it is. So these are important numbers in terms of overall mix of activities that happen in the city. On the next slide, we start calculating and summarizing them. So we look at the tax rates, the multipliers. You know, sometimes you'll say, this spend creates $8 extra in the economy. That's just not well done. What we say, and these multipliers tell you that for every $1 million to spend, you employ almost 7 people. For every dollar that's spent in the economy, it rolls through the economy once when it happens, and then one more time when it happens again throughout the multiplier that happens in the economy. So that's a very reasonable, it's conservative. I think when you have your economists, the state or the county look at this, our numbers have been tested and proven by all kinds of people that have tried to poke holes. So I have a lot of scars from these types of projects around the country. So the next slide really starts talking about the room nights and our methodology for calculating that. And it tells you how many room nights that you're generating here. That's a number that it's hard to get. It's inferred as much as anything. You know, a sophisticated fair will ultimately develop relationships with hotels that are formalized. You probably have informal. So the Marabou, you may be able to get a piece of the dollars as a rebate that we get. So it hasn't been tried yet, but that's a better way to measure the room nights. We just finished working on the TPA for Spokane Valley. So that's a measure of tourism as well. And I don't think there's really been an association with your numbers and the work we did for Spokane Valley. So I think tightening down, getting that, I think you're doing more room nights than we've presented here at 10,000. And just to give you a sense, a 300 room consumes about 50,000 room nights a year, just to give you a sense of scale. So you're meaningful to all the hotels, but you're not filling up a single hotel all the time, but you're very meaningful. So on the next slide, we really summarize the spending, and that really gives you a sense of spending for fair and non-fair events. And when we get to the next slide, we start summarizing. So as you can see, you know, we've got your activity volume and your attendance and your room nights up just the fair, and then you create up to $25 million of spend in the economy. You support 90 jobs. And then you generate tax revenues. So all jurisdictions, the major taxes, $1 million. So if you're asked for a capital improvement request or something like that, you do make money. So it's not you're not investing in the library. You're investing in something that gives you additional return on investment and services the residents of the economy. So you really get kind of double duty with a business like this. On the next slide, talk about the non-fair. Again, it speaks to the volume. This does, you know, almost 80% over above what the fair does. So throughout the year, those car shows and boat shows and things of that nature, you don't really focus on gun shows anymore. But you know, all those types of shows are so interesting. You have a car dealership right down the road that increases their sales when they do a car show. So all those things are intertwined. And so you look at that, so you know, when you roll it up to the next slide, you're a $70 million a year operation. You support over almost 300 jobs. And this has been going on for a long time.
This is my favorite slide.
Yeah. All right. And, you know, operationally, they haven't asked the county for a tremendous amount. What's important is catching up deferred maintenance. And that's the argument here. And I think a thoughtful capital plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, you'll find that a 5-year plan is going to be probably a big number. Because you got to catch up with the Joneses. And I think, you know, you see this, you ask yourself, what more could we do? You actually are a gateway between two cities, this fairgrounds. I think it could be much more meaningful in terms of like a park. You know, you green it up. That Sprague area, Havana Street's rough. You know, so I think that whole streetscaping and placemaking around it is thoughtful. where trails can intersect from the community, make this really a community center place. It already is. I think you accelerate and amplify that and really green it up. Calgary's, their fame is their stampede. You're not there, but it should be a meaningful, when you talk about the podium, you talk about this, the fairground should be in that level of conversation. All right, so that really, the next slide, it really gives you a little bit of a character of where your attendance is, where your spending is, and the ratios are pretty much the same. Your fare is a treasure. Those are cultural institutions. You always want to try to get the best music for those. You always want to try to make it as broad as possible. You bring the field trips in. Connecting kids with food is something that we're seeing as a trend and a positive. Since you have an urban fairgrounds, I hope you're bringing all the 4th and 5th and 6th graders in. And your 4-H program and your FFA program, solid.
Yeah.
See, that's what they're supposed to do. All right. And the fact that you're creating this type of impact on the next slide really illustrates the volume that happens. So as it illustrates, when you put all these taxes together, this is a $4 million, $5 million tax generator from all jurisdictions. As you can see, the reason PFDs exist is because of the orange. The state gives back some of their sales tax for those public facilities districts. That's the reason states have a role in these types of facilities. You don't use the state for dollars. So that's not on the table. Maybe for capital grants, maybe for federal, some of the big things, you can get some grants in. But this is the tool that you use for grants for capital. It also is excellent for public relations. The fact that you are serving so many citizens of this side of the state and Idaho really gives you, I think, a claim to fame. You should be very proud of this operation. I think it's done a good job. So I think, as requests come in on the next slide, you'll look at the various things that happen. When we say net new, we're really trying to focus in on the people that are outside the jurisdiction. Those are all dollars that you've imported. Those are tax dollars you import. So we'd like to separate those out and show you that you're importing that amount of volume to the marketplace. I think the last slide, I know you all are busy today, really indicates that, when you look at the studies here, not only are you concurrent, but you're doing very well in relation to your competition. So that's all I've got, Erin.
It's wonderful. Are there any questions or comments?
Questions?
Mr. Waldron.
Just to follow up on your point on, so congratulations, Erin. Great job.
Thank
Team's
you.
awesome.
Thank you.
And it's just great to see. I didn't realize that the non-fair, like the impact of the non-fair event. So that was really enlightening.
Yeah, we
Thank you.
focus a lot on the fair.
People don't understand.
Yes, yes. So thanks for breaking that out. So on the capital side, were there specific capital projects or capital needs that you see that, or you're just speaking in general, making more investments in your facility ultimately could have a greater return?
Let's take an example. I'm working down at the track in Pasco, and they have a Quonset hut, but it's just a Quonset hut. It has no amenitization. Yours was an ag building. All right. And so the amenitization, we've even seen things like this. Meetings have become important to these. So you have your trade shows, but now you have a do-it-yourself craft show. They want to learn how the sewing machines work and all that kind of stuff. So meeting space has become, so what we've seen happen on these types of campuses is a community center type product is built that complements the grounds that you use, and it kind of upscales it a little bit and gives you, that's where the fancier meetings would happen or the board meetings would happen. And then food service becomes, you all are doing well on food service. comparatively. So that's a natural type of thing. And then upgrading the buildings, just tightening the walls, adding concourses, lobbies and things of that nature. Those are the amenitizations over time that you want to do, but you always want to have a center project. Because that keeps, oh, look what they did, they built the concrete exhibit over here. Those types of things, or, oh, they've tied in the baseball stadium, or they've got more branding on the exhibit hall because baseball came in and helped in the branding lift. So those are the types of things that you always want to be thinking about and being moving. So that's her job. All right, to really put together that capital plan. And it should be very thoughtful and it should be things that are meaningful each year.
To that point with the baseball stadium, did you use any data from Spokane Indians kind of economic impact studies or?
We
Well,
did not. You're familiar with this.
We actually conducted an economic impact analysis for them. I didn't really look at it today and prep myself, but I think, your attendance is almost triple and your impact is probably, all close to triple. May have a little bit more spending, a little bit more corporate visitation, but their average daily spend, you're probably in the at least 75% of that. So you're on par with the Indies. That's the reason the quality should. You have big grounds, but they're not at the level of the stadium. So you want that. That's what you want to have. This is going to be around for a long time. I think you take care of it, it'll be a meaningful thing. And stuff's going to change. We never had drone races at fairgrounds before. We never had robot competitions. Those are the types of things that will keep current. And, these things change all the time. And that's the beauty of it, is the buildings are there. They're virtualized every day. It's kind of a unique thing about these. That's all I got.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm
Forward
not,
to
I'm still here. I have to talk to you about one more thing.
Yeah, we got you for one more agenda item.
Really quick, right? Is this like the end of your session this morning? Yeah, right now, we're gonna hit you hard. 10 million, let's do this.
You caught Jeff's presentation, I take it? Just know if it costs money, the answer is no.
Feel solid about that, okay. One, our theme is Discover the Fun this year. So we are playing off a board game theme. Last year, we had a stamp where you went to different countries around the fairgrounds and people loved that. So we're gonna carry on that with more of a board game theme throughout the buildings this year. And we're actually gonna be solving a puzzle. So you have to solve the puzzle, you'll turn in your sheet. I digress. This is really about our admissions RFP that went out in January. Ron, if you could go to the next slide, please. So we put an RFP out. We have been working with Tickets West the last 10 years or so. We are looking for a company that provides, those on sale tickets, pre-sale, the ability for us to sell in our office. We get a lot of walk-in traffic because they know they're going to save on those handling fees. But the other side of, besides the ticketing sales and the marketing, is that we need a group to help us manage our sales during the fair. All of our gates, our 70+ fair workers that just are ticket sellers and ticket takers. So with that, if we go to the next slide, please. We received 3 submissions. We have talked to so many ticketing companies over the last few years. A lot of it does come down to that on-site management component. I mean, we're asking you to be camped out with us for 13, 14 days, working sun up, sun down. So we had eTix, Sapphire Tix, Paculin, which is the parent company of Tickets West. Next slide, please, Ron. And Paculin Tickets West came out. We selected them based on their experience, their product quality. They are great at managing our infrastructure, and their price came in a lot lower than other companies. So next slide. So I'm just requesting that you would approve this admissions contract on next week's agenda so we can move forward with this. Any questions?
Any questions for him?
How long is it run? Contract is it? I can't remember. how-
It's 7 years
Okay.
up to, so we'll renew it annually, but it could be a 7 year.
Okay.
And you know, if you have free time, you wanna be a ticket seller or ticket taker, we could use you at the fair. So. Alright, well, that concludes our show today. So, great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions, please call.
Oh, Aaron?
Yeah.
Since you're here.
Yeah.
You. Of course, I'm not gonna.
Do you
have
need
it
an
that hard,
upgrade?
do I? Yeah, and of
Okay.
course I can't find it.
Okay.
Never mind. Give it to Ron. Do you send those in? Or expired?
Oh, I have them.
Okay. I'll get this for you. Thank you. Okay, miscellaneous items.
I'll take it if no one else does.
Okay, we haven't seen you today.
And working with me and looking back. I think John Colton should be on if you could promote him, Ron.
There's John.
So the portals are open for us to put in our what we all call earmarks, different titles by different houses. Last we talked, we were going to be doing the stabilization center expansion again with Senator Murray. Just we're not getting it this year's earmarks, so we would redo that one. John and I have discussed putting a green building one towards, or clean building one towards Cantwell's office. And then for Baumgartner's office, we could re-up the Fairchild Road again that we had, but that ended up not getting. Or John and I have also discussed possible of a technology one. We thought might be, especially as we're looking to the assessor treasurer needs, he would understand the treasurer's office. We thought John had a good idea, thinking through that. So you want to add to those comments, John?
No, I think you covered it. You know, these would be things on both the judicial and treasury side. So one pretty extreme situation is if the county was hacked, information on informants could be released. So I think when I heard that from IT, that seemed like a incredibly important issue that we should be thinking about. And there's a lot of other really terrible things that could be happening if the county IT system would get hacked, as I'm sure you could all imagine.
We have three ITs. That's the Aumentum, which is currently called the Send Global. I think I'm saying my words correctly. That's a bigger one. The cybersecurity, I think, is one that we could, you can kind of just do as much as you can with whatever we got. And then that GEM system in juvenile justice is also justice related. So kind of all of them. Baumgartner, he's very interested in international security type matters. And of course, it's the treasurer's office. So these are all three that we thought might speak to things that we feel he's been championing in his time. So, but we do need to narrow it down or just say go with the one that makes the most sense once we did talk with Kevin and Sean over at IT. Everybody agrees those are our top three choices. Are we thinking like 500,000 requests from Baumgartner, John?
I think we could go for $1 million and just let them know it's scalable.
Did the bigger assessor treasurer one? That's a bigger conversation because we would need to commit to getting it done within a certain amount of time. So then we'd have to be ready to spend into some fund balance. It would be a one time, but still it's a chunk of money. If we did the GEMS, which is an acronym for something, I think, or cybersecurity, both of those are, GEMS is about a $500,000 plus 150 annual. So over 2 years, that'd be at least 800 probably. Cybersecurity, I think it's very scalable. So those two based on size and I think the time to get it submitted might make more sense than the Aumentum this year.
So. So you would just take what, you'd pick one of those asks. Okay.
And I'd say probably between cybersecurity or the gym system, just dollar amounts line up. I don't know, you guys are ready to commit 6-8 million behind the other. Not saying you're not gonna do it, but thinking you probably don't wanna do it today. So go with those, one of those two.
Again?
Okay, so we'll figure out which one makes the most sense, work on that. And then do you guys like the idea of going for the clean building with Cantwell versus doubling down on the stabilization side? We'll already have stabilization with Senator Murray. I'm assuming since she said yes once, we do yes again, but who knows what the competition is, so I don't know if we can take that.
No, and I talked to their office. They're certainly still interested. There may be a world in which we can ask for a little bit higher amount too. So we'll talk to their DC staff and see if that is the case.
So last year we did same project with both.
We did the same project with both. I think we put in at 4 and got 3. Is that right, John?
That sounds right.
And then the other office, Kathy's office, we did the road. And I think we put in for 4 or 5. We got scaled back to 1 after she announced her retirement.
Yeah.
As long as we know Murray's still committed to the stabilization center, interested or supportive or whatever the right word is, then I think it's a good thing to add the clean buildings on, especially because the general fund impact.
We were thinking. So we will go forward with that and get them in. We might ping some of you for help on outreach for letters of support. We will get those going. That's all. We finished the Visit Spokane, but when you stepped out on the phone before budget started.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks all.
Thank you, John.
Hi, John.
Of course. Bye.
Ashley, you had your hand raised a little bit ago.
I do. I just wanted to give you guys an update on the Citizens Commission on Salaries. So they did conclude last week, and they made the recommendations. There was a 3% increase to the base salaries for commissioners for 2025, and then an additional 3% in 2026 is what they've set for the BOCC salaries. And that will go into effect the 22nd, so the beginning of the next pay period. And then they recommended a change for the assessor, auditor, clerk, and treasurer. Currently, those 4 positions are at 97.5% of a BOCC salary. They recommend moving that to 98%. So the result is the commissioners move from $128,940.43 to $132,808.64. And then the recommendation for those other 4 positions would be that they move from $125,716.92 to $130,152.47. So that's the recommendation. The auditor's office is aware of this. I'm waiting on my last e-signature this morning, and then she'll get it filed for me for the BOCC salaries. And then for the other 4, in the event that you are all in agreement that you will be taking that recommendation forward, I did get a resolution ready, and it is on your consent agenda for this afternoon with the movement from 97.5% to 98% for the assessor, auditor, clerk, and treasurer. As a reminder, you all set those salaries. So if you disagree with that, we can remove the resolution and you guys can decide something different. But I did prepare it in advance in the event that you wanted to approve it prior to the beginning of the pay period start date on the 22nd.
And that's for tomorrow's consent agenda.
Yes, I'm sorry, tomorrow. Today's Monday. Yes.
Okay. All right, any questions? Nope. Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Any other executive sessions, Commissioner French, or not executive sessions, miscellaneous?
No, just miscellaneous. I forward you all an email of a summary of activities for last week and stuff, and so it's in your inbox. For your reading and pleasure.
And Scott, any executive sessions? Tomorrow, okay.
Nothing for me.
Nothing. Okay. Brother, Pat, any, anything on the media front that we need to be aware of?
We had a couple of interviews. We will have a story this week in the Inlander on opioid funding, mental health and addiction. We completed that interview on Friday. The story's due today and it will run on Wednesday. I know the reporter Eliza was going to reach out to at least one commissioner. So if you hear from her, let me know, but that's what the story is connected to. The city had a press release on Friday, and so she asked one or two questions about that. But the main focus was on STARS and our investments there. So rounding out almost full media saturation on the STARS 775 investment. And then we also sat down with Justin to talk about planning for a few upcoming initiatives and things he'll be bringing to the board. So more on that later. And then on the proclamation front, we will have some activity, I believe, next week on those. So all that's set, and we're scooting into April and May here. We've also locked down the next two guests for KSPS Spotlight. For April will be Commissioner CUNY, and for May will be Commissioner French. So that's the roundup.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh.
Pat, did we hear anything from KSPS on record-setting ratings or anything from Saturday for my spotlight?
You're still counting the numbers.
Yeah.
They broke the machine.
Oh.
They've now moved to the second hand.
No.
Nielsen is really struggling.
And Pat, I did hear from the Inlander this morning. I talked to them on the STAR stuff.
Great. Thanks for the report. And the episode should be live. I think it premiered on our YouTube channel over the weekend. And so we'll work with you and Chrissy, make sure you have links and things and can get it out to folks who want to see it.
My mom and a few other people.
And then I was contacted this morning by KHQ that wanted to do a story on the presentation that Mr. Sparber gave to us this morning. And so they were intrigued by the presentation. Congratulations. Now you're on the hook to comment on it. So anyway, so we're going to do that this afternoon.
You're welcome.
Pat, I think they were rerunning the story, but yesterday I caught that Krem was running that. I think maybe they were like running a bunch of stories from the whole week, but they ran that story that they did on our investments to STARS. So I don't know if you had already seen that one. It was I thought it was a pretty good overview and good interviews with STARS.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else for the good of the order? No. Okay. Well, it is 12:12 and we are